हेलो गुड आफ्टरनून। आज का हमारा टॉपिक है इनकम फ्रॉम हाउस प्रॉपर्टी एंड आई एम सी ए श्रेया. I am going to be taking you through this. A little bit about myself. I completed my CA in 2015, so around 10 years of post qualification experience. And I hope the class on salaries was taken well by you. You got a chance to solve the questions. And if you have any doubts, if you want any questions to be done in the class, then please let me know so that I can plan this class accordingly. I can keep some time at the end to do salaries. Please let me know. Okay, no problem. So at the end, when we get half an hour to do the queries on house property, we will also use it for solving queries on salaries if you have any. All right. For now, let us start with house property, which is the topic of our day. So, as you know, the weights assigned to different heads of income in your examination is around 15 marks. So, it can be across any of the heads. So you need to be prepared for all of them, and house property is one of them. It is one of the easiest ones that you have. The number of sections, the complexity of questions is low compared to the other heads. So I would say, please listen to this carefully. This 2.5 hours will give you a good exposure or a good recap of what this entire head is about, and with very high chance of you being able to solve the question correctly in the exams with guaranteed marks. Okay. All right. So the first half an hour we will spend doing a quick recap of the provisions. 1.5 hours next we will spend on some questions which have been taken from RTP, MTP study modules, and they've been curated for this class today. And the last half an hour, we will do a quick assessment of what you learned, and we'll answer your queries on house property as well as salaries. There will be some home practice questions, of which I will upload the answers later. And, you can get a chance to solve them on your own and then verify with the solutions. All right, let's start. So, how income from house property, the entire ambit of house property has been summarized in front of you on the screen here. Okay, section 22 is the chargeability section. Chargeability, as we studied in the last class also, what is chargeability? It is the section of the Income Tax Act which gives you the right to deal with a particular type of income, that this is a particular type of income, this is what it should be applicable on, this is when it should get triggered. So basically, it is the preamble to this head, any chargeability section, that when do we think about when we think about income from house property, what are we really trying to cover? Then will come the nuances of how we will calculate it. Okay. So once we know what it is going to cover, then we will come to how to value it. So first is determination of annual value. Okay, house property is not necessarily, like, in very loose terms, we feel income from house property is rental income. But in our income tax terms, rent is not really the income from house property. Annual value is, because you have seen cases where even where there is no rent, you have deemed certain thing to be rent. So therefore, annual value is actually what they are looking at, not technically rent earned. So determination of annual value is the next most important thing, which is section 23. There are some deductions allowed under section 24. There are some things where deduction is not allowable, that is section 25. And then what happens in exceptional cases where you have some arrears of previous year's rent that you have received in the current year. So there's a timing difference between accrual and receipt. What happens then? So that is section 25A. What happens if a property is owned by more than one owner? Then what to do, how to tax it, how to compute the income? That is section 26. And there is a concept of legal owner and there is a concept of deemed owner. So when we do the chargeability, you will understand the importance of owner in case of this section. And then when you read deemed owner into that, you will understand that not only legal owner, in some cases, the deemed owner will also be subject to this chapter. So without any further delay, what is section 22? What is the chargeability? So please remember certain catchwords that we are going to talk about now. There has to be a building or land appurtenant thereto. that means building is primary. If there is a vacant land and you earn something out of that, it is income from other sources. Or if you are into the business of letting out vacant land, then it may be profits and gains from business or profession, but it cannot be income from house property. For income from house property, there has to be a property in the first place on a piece of land. So building or land, or if there is a corridor space or an ancillary, a pertinent area, that is fine. But primarily there has to be a building in the first place. That is number one. Because see, if the section doesn't get triggered, there is really no sense in calculating or going through any of the other provisions of this chapter. So it's very important that we pick up right at the very beginning that whether at all this chapter needs to be seen for this kind of case or not, right? Secondly, assessee must be the owner. Only for owners, this chapter is relevant. If you have taken a property on rent, now you are letting it again. Okay, so you are a tenant and you have a subtenant. In this case, whatever rent income you derive, is it income from house property? No, because you're not the owner, you are a tenant yourself. In this case, this income will be in the residuary head, which is income from other sources, right? And if you are into the business of letting out properties, or if you are using the property for your business, then any income earned from such property will be income from business or profession, PGBP, profits and gains from business or profession, right? Okay. So this is the long and short of section 22. Just a second. Yeah. And there are some nuances, it is generally in questions, they give you a house property. It doesn't matter, but there are some nuances which they may try to test through maybe MCQs or through theoretical questions. So I'll just quickly brush them. Listen to it carefully so that it sticks in your mind. And if at all it is required, you can apply it. Building may not be just residential, it can be commercial premises also, number one. Secondly, land appurtenant means what? Land connected with the building, garden, garage, etc. These are covered. Okay. Assessee must be owner. What is ownership in this case? Ownership is the right to receive rent. It is not whether or not there is a registration of sale deed is immaterial. The right to receive rent, if that is established as per common parlance, you will be considered owner for the purpose of Income Tax Act. Okay. What is ownership? Freehold as well as leasehold rights can be ownership. Okay. And deemed ownership, like what is specific cases of section 27, those are also called, those are also cases of deriving your ownership. If you own the building, which is the important criteria in this case, you need not also own the land on which the building is standing. Okay. So ownership of the building is important. All right. You must be owner during the relevant previous year that we are dealing with, which is FY 23-24 in your case. You may not be the owner in the assessment year also. Okay. We will also, deal with cases like arrears, section 25A. What happens if you receive arrears of rent, from earlier years in the current year, maybe current year, you're no longer the owner. But in that case, because the year to which it pertained, you were the owner. So now when you are receiving and it is becoming taxable, still you need not be the owner. That's an exception. But the general case is the income year in which we are dealing with, during that period, you should be the owner. Okay. If there is a disputed ownership, there's a title dispute going on, then Income Tax Department will decide who is the owner and will deem that person to be responsible for paying tax on income from house property. Okay. And what about unrealized rent and arrears of rent? Then later on, whoever is the owner doesn't matter because that's an exceptional section in 25A that we will be dealing with. Okay. How do you use the property? Just don't use for business profession. Otherwise, it will go to PGBP. Otherwise, for any purpose is fine. And obviously, you should not be in the business of letting out because again, that becomes PGBP. Okay. What if you have held a stock in trade? So you are a real estate developer. You make buildings. Okay. So buildings are stock in trade for you. If you earn anything out of that, now they must be idle. If you let them out, you earn anything, then that is income from house property. And what if it is till 2 years from the end of completion, if it is just lying unoccupied, then the annual value can also be deemed nil. That we will deal with, in the coming period time, that what is annual value and all that. But what I'm trying to say is that even if it is held as stock in trade, it can be income from house property, which is a little peculiar. People tend to get confused. Stock in trade means it must be business purpose. So if you are a real estate developer and you're holding the property as stock in trade, then you are eligible to earn income from house property. Okay. Composite rent. Sometimes you just don't receive rent for the building. You also receive rent for, ancillary benefits like furniture, like lift, security, power backup, etc. So if you that together, in the agreement, if it appears like that, together it is called composite rent. Now, what do you do with that? So how do you split the composite rent? The sum attributable to use of property should be income from house property, and the sum attributable to use of services, these incidental services, should be profits and gains or income from other sources, as the case may be. Now, if they are inseparable, that means the rent agreement is such that you cannot divide the rental value of property vis-a-vis the services. You cannot divide. The agreement is composite. Then the entire rent will be taxable as profits and gains from business or profession or income from other sources, as the case may be, depending on whether the owner's business is that of letting out or not. And but if you can separate the rent from building vis-a-vis the rent from assets, if that is possible in the agreement, or two different values are given and it is possible to take one and not take the other. So tenant has the right that, okay, you only take my building, you need not take the furniture, or you don't take the ancillary services. So if that is possible, then building income is obviously income from house property. Anything else is PGBP or IFOS, as the case may be, right? Now, these are little things, we do so many sums, we tend to ignore them. You will not find them in the summaries also when we do. And perhaps if such a question doesn't come, you need not even know it. But if a question comes, then you should have at least heard of it before to make the wildest guess, right? That's why I'm doing it in the recap class. Okay. Now, income from house property situated outside India. Is it covered? Is it not covered? See, the bottom line is you need to see the residential status of the assessee. If the assessee is a resident and his global income is taxable, then income from house property situated outside India is also very much in the purview of Indian income tax. And how you calculate the income from house property is also subject to the mechanism given in the Income Tax Act. Okay. And if you are not resident or RNOR or something, then if you receive in India, then otherwise not. So you apply the basic principles of residence and scope of total income. There is nothing new or separate for, house property situated outside India. All right. We just wanted to say there is no exception also that a property has to be in India for this chapter to get triggered, right? That I wanted to make clear. Okay. So these were some nuances about ownership. Now let's come to annual value. Section 23. Now this is very important. I mean, if some questions come, there are hardly any sums where you need not apply this and you can right away solve. Okay. This is the touchstone. I mean, you have to start with this. So what is it? Gross annual value is a concept you need to determine. You reduce municipal taxes paid by the owner during the previous year, and you get net annual value. Net annual value will tell you the income from house property. Okay. So now let's see what is gross annual value in that case. Everything is defined. They have laid down how to calculate it. Nothing to be applied through mind. All the steps, all the protocol to apply the steps are given in the income tax law. Number one, you calculate the higher of fair rent and municipal value. Okay. So, okay, I'll throw some terms at you and just remember how they get used. Fair rent, municipal value, standard rent, expected rent, actual rent. Okay. Now let's do them one by one. Fair rent. Fair rent is basically, in common words, it is the rent which any other property in a similar area would deserve. That is fair rent. इस एरिया का और इस एरिया की प्रॉपर्टी और किसी प्रॉपर्टी का क्या रेंट हो सकता है, दैट इज द रेंट विच दिस प्रॉपर्टी शुड ऑल्सो डिराइव. Okay, that is the best substitute, best estimate of rent of property of an area. That is fair rent. Municipal value is the value determined by the municipal authorities for municipal tax collection. Okay, that is municipal value. Standard rent is the rent fixed under the Rent Control Act. So that is standard rent. So these three are parameters. You will not be asked to determine these. These will be given to you in the sum. But what will you do with this? So you will first take the higher of fair rent and municipal value. You pick up whichever is higher. You compare it with the standard rent. Then whichever is lower, you get the result which is expected rent. Expected rent means as per common benchmark, which is through the fair rent, municipal value, or standard rent. This is at least the rent which this property deserves. Expected rent is the benchmarked rent, the rent that this property deserves, irrespective of the actual transaction value. Okay. So this is expected rent. Second is actual rent. Actual rent is simple because it is in actually actual. Okay. What I mean to say is that is the rent which you're getting out of this transaction. So actual is simple to understand. Whatever agreement you have with the tenant, nobody is questioning it. Actual is actual. Okay. So you compare expected rent with actual rent, you take whichever is higher, and we come to gross annual value. So fair rent or municipal value, whichever is higher, then this outcome or standard rent, whichever is lower, is equal to gross annual value and is equal to expected rent. And expected rent or actual rent, whichever is higher, is equal to gross annual value. Gross annual value minus municipal taxes paid is equal to net annual value. So if actual rent is, now there are some, we will add a little bit of tadka to this basic concept because there will be variations around this. Okay. What happens if actual rent is more than expected rent? Normally, whichever is higher is the concept. So if actual rent is more than expected rent, then actual rent should be GAV. Okay. What happens if actual rent is less than expected rent? Then they tell you, please investigate further. Is it because of vacancy? Is it because during the year, for some time, the property was lying vacant, therefore actual rent turned out to be lower? Now, this is very logical, I'm telling you why. Expected rent is an annual concept because that is a benchmark. This is what this property deserves. So it's more or less an annual concept. But actual rent is the transaction value, whatever you have had with your tenant. Now, if for any reasons of vacancy, the tenant did not occupy the property for the full year, then the actual rent would obviously be prorated, would be for the period for which he actually occupied the property. Now, if you compare actual rent with expected rent in this case, then you're actually comparing apple with orange. They are not comparable. One is for 12 months, one is for say 10 months. How can you compare and find whichever is higher? Therefore, in this case, they say that if actual rent is less than expected rent only because of vacancy, which means had the tenant occupied the property for the full year, the actual rent would have been more than the expected rent. Then actually the actual rent should be GAV. So that's why they are asking you to take the actual rent. But if actual rent is less than expected rent for any other reason, okay, then they say, okay, then you take expected rent to be GAV. Because if you have agreed with the vendor, with the tenant to, collect less rent than what is prevailing in the market, than the benchmarked return from this property, then that is your problem. From income tax purpose, expected rent will be the GAV. All right. So the genuineness they consider only if the vacancy is, if the actual rent is lower because of vacancy. Then they see, okay, fine, take actual rent. But if for any other reason the actual rent is lower than expected rent, then they will not consider the fact that you've actually earned less income from this property. They will say it is perhaps your agreement with the tenant to, recover something lesser than what the market is, and therefore expected rent will be GAV. All right. Now, when you see actual rent, there is a little bit of twist that you need to do. Actual rent should be reduced by unrealized rent. So rent which you will not realize for the period for which the property is vacant or the person does not want to pay. So unrealized, what you don't intend to recover, you please reduce it. Okay, because there is no point paying tax on something which is notional. You are perhaps not going to recover it. What if you recover it later? Then it is like a, it's like a recovery of bad debt. We'll tax it later under 25A. But right now, if you do not intend to recover it, please reduce it. That is what the law says. But there has to be 4 conditions to be satisfied in order to reduce unrecoverable rent from actual rent. Okay. Those 4 conditions are laid down in Rule 4. Okay, for unrealized rent, and which I have put on the right hand side of this screen, if you can see. And I have also put an acronym for you to remember the conditions, because these are it may be a very short question for you, and so simple these are. If you write, you will just quickly earn the marks. Okay, first is bona fide tenancy. You must prove that the tenancy is bona fide. It's not a sham transaction. You're not trying to bypass income or do anything else. It's a pure tenant landlord relationship. Bona fide tenancy, that means genuine tenancy. Okay. Second, steps for vacation. That is, the tenant has vacated. He is not going to pay you rent, but he has vacated the property or you have made him vacate. You have taken steps to vacate. Okay. Third, you have at least tried to file a case. So you have taken steps to institute legal proceedings against the tenant. You have at least made some reasonable steps to recover the rent. If you didn't do anything, then that means you didn't even try. Okay. Fourth, you should have at least not given any other house property to him he should not be occupying any other house property of yours while you have relieved him from this, right? So there has to be an actual, severance of relationship also with him. All right. So these are all very genuine. Even if you think from common sense, I think you would guess perhaps two of them. So a very, very logical reasoning that what conditions should be satisfied in order to claim something as unrealized rent. So if you just read them, it will register, and just remember this acronym so that you recall it also very well. One is B, BO, B in small o, which bona fide tenancy. Second is S, that is steps taken for vacation. Third is case, C, case instituted. Fourth is H, no other house property in occupation of the same tenant. Okay, so Bosch, this is a very easy way to remember the 4 conditions of Rule 4. Okay, next. If you have any doubts, please interrupt me because right now I cannot see the portal. Okay. Next, we come to different types of property. Self-occupied property, deemed to be let out property, property held as stock in trade, and what to do with all of these. Okay. Because how to determine the annual value we have understood in section 23(1), the basics of it. Now, what kind of property, what type of application of these principles, this is something we are going to deal with in subsequent clauses of section 23, that is 23(2), 23(3), 23(4). Okay. Okay. Now, where the property is self-occupied for own residence or unoccupied owing to employment, business, or profession carried out at any other place. So you can have a property which you use it. You do not let you own the property, but you have not let it out to anybody else. You want to use it. You stay over there. Okay. So fine, it's self-occupied. Or you may have a property which you have not let out, but it is unoccupied. You neither you stay nor you have let out to anybody else. Unoccupied. Why? Because you work or do business in one place and the property is in another place. And practically, it is not possible for you to commute every day and go and stay at that place. Okay. So that other property of yours is owned by you, but you do not use it. Nobody else also stays over there because it is very far from the place where you work. Okay. That becomes unoccupied. In any case, self-occupied and unoccupied properties are seen to in the same way by the income tax law. Okay. What to do if you have a self-occupied property? See, its annual value is nil. If you would have taken expected rent, you would have got a number. Okay. Because that is benchmarked. That is market rent. Okay. But still the law says that because you've actually not let it out, it would be very unfair to deem that you have let it out and you should collect a rent and all that. So they've said, fine, take annual value to be nil. Now, when you take annual value to be nil, so gross annual value is nil. So you imagine that, that there itself it has fallen flat. That means you are not proposing to tax any income from house property in that case. Okay. But how many properties are you allowed to just hold as many properties as you want and one in every country of the world and say that, see, I cannot stay everywhere. So for those reasons, I have to keep them unoccupied. So law has given you a limit of up to 2 house properties. Earlier it was 1. Okay, earlier it was 1. Recently it has become 2. For you it is 2. So please remember 2, don't get confused. Up to 2 house properties you can keep as self-occupied or unoccupied, which means you can claim nil gross annual value for up to 2 house properties in one financial year. Understood? Okay. So you can claim that. And if you have more than 2 self-occupied or unoccupied properties, what do you do? See, the law says only 2 we will give you as relief. Anything else, we will deem that you have let it out because you don't want to earn anything from it. We don't believe you. Anything else, we will assume you have let it out. You do not have actual rent because you are saying it is vacant. So we will deem the expected rent to be gross annual value. That is what the law says. Which of these will be deemed to be let out? Which of these will be deemed to be self-occupied? That the law has given an option on the assessee. Whatever suits you better. It's like a buy two, get one free. Which ones you want to buy and which one you want to get free. It is your choice. Similarly, the law has given you a freedom. You have 3 properties, calculate the income as if all the 3 are let out. Okay, then you compare that, which ones you should deem to be let out, which ones you treat as self-occupied, whichever option, whichever regime gives you the least income, you use that. Okay, but we cannot let you keep all the properties as self-occupied. Okay. The other property would be deemed to be let out in respect of which expected rent would be the GAV. That's what we said, that the other property, because if up to 2 are self-occupied, then anything else is deemed let out. And that be so, then you don't have actual rent, you need to take expected rent. All right. The next concept is, what if the property is held as stock in trade? Why are we dealing with it in this chapter? Like we spoke about it a few minutes back, that property held as stock in trade is actually income from house property and not income from business or profession. That's why we are dealing it here. Otherwise, we would have talked about it in the PGBP chapter. Okay. Where property consisting of building or land appurtenant thereto is held as stock in trade, means you are a real estate developer, you are a constructor, builder. Okay. And the whole or any part of the property is not let out. So you're not having actual income for the whole or any part of the year. Then what do? So the annual value of property or part of the property for up to 2 years from the end of the financial year in which certificate of completion is obtained shall be taken as nil. So they are saying that you are the developer, you have completed the property. What is the evidence to show completion? There is a certificate of completion which you need to obtain from the relevant authority, from competent authority. You've obtained the certificate, it is complete. Now the year in which you've obtained the certificate, you need to go to the end of that financial year. Then you calculate 2 more years from there. Till then, you treat them as self-occupied, in the sense you do not have to consider any annual value attached to it. But after that, you will have to apply the expected rent in case you've not actually earned anything. Okay. So up to 2 years from the end of the financial year in which certificate of completion is obtained from the competent authority, you can take the annual value of the property to be nil. Okay. If you have any doubts, because we have covered section 22 and section 23, and we are now going to start section 24. If you have any doubts so far, please ask. Conceptually, if you are clear, then application of these principles will be very easy in the sums, because it is not at all a difficult part to apply these principles in the sum. Conceptually, you should be clear about the different types of properties, the different types of evaluations that we have to do for them. Yes, Abhijit. You can unmute and ask. Abhijit, are you able to unmute? Tech support, if you can check whether participants can unmute. Okay. In case of any technical problem, if you're not able to ask your query, please leave it in the portal. At the end of the class, I will see the portal and I'll answer to you. Okay. And if you are able to unmute through any technical intervention, then at that moment, please stop me and ask. All right, let's proceed. Deductions from net annual value, which is section 24. Okay, so we have derived net annual value. That means we have had gross annual value, and we reduced municipal taxes paid by the owner during the year. A little bit more about the municipal taxes. Municipal taxes are allowable on payment basis. So they have to be paid and allowed on payment basis during the year. Okay. And they have to be paid by the owner. Please be very careful. In some questions, you will see that tenant has paid 2,000 rupees as municipal tax and this, and they just go about it. And you will be like, okay, this is a regular some taxes. There is some number, so we just have to take it. Our mind automatically tends to pick up all the numerical values that we see in the question. but everything is not relevant. If it is paid by the tenant, it is not paid by the owner, then there is no need to deduct it because it is not deductible. Anything paid by the owner is only deductible and on payment basis. So if there was some accrual of municipal tax during the year, but the owner did not pay anything, and next year he paid 24 months municipal tax together, then next year he will get the deduction. This year he will not get anything. So it is on payment basis. Okay, very clear. Very few concepts in income tax are payment basis driven. Most of them are mercantile or accrual. So please remember the exceptions. Municipal tax is one of them. Okay. All right. Next, and that too only in this income from house property. If you come across it in any other chapter, in any other head, it may not be the same. So please check there. Okay. Deductions allowed from net annual value. What are the things you will reduce? So again, you see which kind of property are we dealing with? Are you dealing with a let out or deemed to be let out? Let out or deemed to be let out properties are same in the eyes of law, in the sense their calculation mechanism is same. And self-occupied or unoccupied is the same in the eyes of law. The calculation is the same. Okay. Let out or deemed to be let out, you get two types of deduction. One is standard deduction under 24A at the rate of 30% of NAV. The simplest ever. You calculate NAV and you right away discount it by 30%. You got a 30% discount from the income tax department. 30% off. Why? They are saying that normally if you are earning income from house property, you should be incurring some expenses during the year to repair it, overhaul it, cleaning, maintenance, this and that. Something you should be incurring every year. Now, if they start asking each assessee, by what have you incurred, please start claiming on accrual basis, then it will become a chaos or difficult for them to administer. Therefore, they have laid down a thumb rule that we don't care about what you actually spend. You may spend more than this, you may spend less than this. We have given you a blanket 30% discount. Then go use 30% of net annual value. We assume you spend on its repairs. Okay, we don't need any proof of how much you actually spent, right? And then there is interest on borrowed capital. So if you have taken any loan for the purpose of purchase of a property or construction of a property or repair of a property, then we'll allow you that also. Okay. Now, for self-occupied property, standard deduction, what do you think? Okay, one quick question. Self-occupied property, you can see that the box of standard deduction is missing as against let out property. Anybody can unmute and tell me why this is missing. Is it a miss on my part? Have I missed to write it? Please, there was so much cooperation in the last class and I have not heard a single word in this class. I'm feeling very, demoralized. Hello. Pooja. Yes, please. Can you unmute? Is it a problem to unmute? Two participants have raised hand, but nobody is talking. Tech support, can you please help here?
मैम एक्चुअली अनम्यूट नहीं हुआ था, अभी जस्ट एक्सेस मिला है अनम्यूट के लिए.
अच्छा, okay, thank you.
We are not able to.
Yes, Abhishek had asked a question, then Pooja raised hand. Please, one by one, you'll go asking your questions.
मैम
Yes, please.
व्हाट इज योर क्वेश्चन मैम? मैम एक्चुअली है ना, मुझे सैलरी हेड में प्रॉब्लम थी. जो आपने क्वेश्चंस दिए हुए थे उसमें जो मल्टीपल चॉइस क्वेश्चन था वो मुझसे नहीं निकला, तो वो एक बार आप बता दीजिए.
ठीक है, MCQ क्वेश्चन नंबर 7, राइट?
यस मैम, जो फर्स्ट एमसीक्यू का फर्स्ट क्वेश्चन
ठीक है, क्वेश्चन नंबर 7.1 and 7.2 both we will do at the end of this class. ठीक है?
ओके मैम. मैम व्हाट इज योर क्वेश्चन मैम? अभी जो आप पूछ रहे थे.
What is my?
अभी आप क्वेश्चन पूछ रहे थे मैम.
ओह, अच्छा, हाँ. मेरा क्वेश्चन ये है कि सेल्फ ऑक्यूपाइड प्रॉपर्टी में 24A का स्टैंडर्ड डिडक्शन क्यों नहीं है?
क्योंकि मैम उसमें नेट एनुअल वैल्यू 0 होती है.
करेक्ट, वेरी करेक्ट आंसर. 0 का 30% 0 ही है, इसलिए फालतू में लिख के क्यों टाइम वेस्ट करें? वी हैव नॉट मेंशन्ड इट. एब्सोल्युटली राइट. वी मूव ऑन. अच्छा, पूजा raised hand. Did you want to answer the same thing or anything else? You were only Pooja. Somebody else also raised hand, I could see. एनीवे अब आपको अनम्यूट एक्सेस मिल चुका है, अब आपको एज एंड व्हेन प्रॉब्लम हो आप अनम्यूट करें। ऑल राइट, सेल्फ ऑक्यूपाइड प्रॉपर्टी में बट इंटरेस्ट ऑन बोरोड कैपिटल अलाउड है, उसको लेके कुछ एक रूल्स हैं, वी विल कम टू दैट, बट लेट्स सी प्रिंसिपली क्या है। सबसे पहले, इफ द लोन इज टेकन फॉर रिपेयर, रिन्यूअल, रिकंस्ट्रक्शन ऑफ हाउस प्रॉपर्टी, okay, and not paid back within 5 years, and the property is not ready within 5 years, this is the first category. Loan taken for repair, renewal, या फिर for construction, purchase, and the property is not ready within 5 years. And second case is where the loan is taken for acquisition or house construction of house property, and the property is acquired within 5 years of taking the loan. Now what happens? Okay, so if it is for repair, renewal, देन आपको रिपेयर के लिए कितना खर्चा लगेगा? दे हैव एस्टिमेटेड 30,000, उन्होंने बोला आपको 30,000 मैक्सिमम इंटरेस्ट ऑन लोन, लोन का वैल्यू नहीं है ये, इंटरेस्ट का वैल्यू है, इंटरेस्ट ऑन लोन मैक्सिमम दे विल गिव यू 30,000 पर ईयर पर असेसी। ओके, एक दो ही मैक्सिमम सेल्फ ऑक्यूपाइड आप रख सकते हो, बाकी तो डीम लेट आउट करना पड़ेगा। तो अब तो सबके मिला के पर असेसी पर ईयर 30,000 टुवर्ड्स इंटरेस्ट ऑन लोन फॉर रिपेयर रिन्यूअल। ओके, देन अगर आपने लोन एक्विजिशन कंस्ट्रक्शन इसके लिए लिया है और वो 5 साल के अंदर प्रॉपर्टी कंप्लीट हो गई है विदिन द एंड ऑफ द विदिन 5 years फ्रॉम द एंड ऑफ द फाइनेंशियल ईयर इन विच द कैपिटल वाज बोरोड, एंड यू हैव obtained a certificate from lender, you will see in your articleship, perhaps it will start na in your case, you will see SBI का हाउसिंग लोन वेरी फेमस, एक सर्टिफिकेट मिलता है at the end of the year, this is deductible under 24B, this is deductible under 80C. So basically, एक requirement है law में कि you should get a certificate from the lender. It should not be like a random, आपने किसी से भी लोन ले लिया और उसका कुछ certification ही नहीं है कि वो किस लिए मिला है, नहीं है. Why they have mentioned this condition is because it has to be a purposeful loan. Loan given to you to buy this property only or to repair this property only, and it should be used for that purpose only. And for that reason, they want a certificate from the lender. Okay. कि ये मेरा लोन है, ये इस पर्पस के लिए और ये इंटरेस्ट पेएबल है. और अगर आपने 5 साल के अंदर उसका कंस्ट्रक्शन एक्विजिशन कंप्लीट भी कर लिया है, दोनों कंडीशंस अगर मेट हैं, तो मैक्सिमम 2 lakhs इन रिस्पेक्ट ऑफ 1 or 2, मतलब अप टू 2 सेल्फ ऑक्यूपाइड प्रॉपर्टीज पर असेसी पर ईयर. सो मैक्सिमम 2 lakhs, अप टू 2 प्रॉपर्टीज मैक्सिमम 2 lakhs. और अगर ये कंडीशंस मेट नहीं है, मतलब प्रॉपर्टी तो लोन तो एक्विजिशन के लिए था, बट प्रॉपर्टी वाज नॉट कंप्लीट विद इन 5 years, और यू डू नॉट हैव सर्टिफिकेट ऑफ कंप्लीशन, then you are only getting 30,000, because then we'll assume ki we don't know, maybe it's a sham case, we are not able to verify, so we are assuming only up to 30,000 is going to be the reduction in respect of all your self-occupied properties. Okay, so there are 2 limits: 30,000 in case of repair or renewal, reconstruction, or acquisition, construction not backed by certificate, or property not complete within 5 years. All these cases, maximum annual limit per assessee per year is 30,000. Acquisition or construction loan, if property complete within 5 years and certificate available, then the limit is 2 lakhs up to all the self-occupied properties per assessee per financial year. ओके, मतलब आपका एक ऐसा सिचुएशन आ जाएगा सेल्फ ऑक्यूपाइड प्रॉपर्टी में जब नेट एसेट वैल्यू तो निल है, स्टैंडर्ड डिडक्शन मिलेगा नहीं, लेकिन इंटरेस्ट कुछ ना कुछ मिलने की वजह से द नेट रिजल्ट विल बी नेगेटिव. यू विल हैव अ लॉस फ्रॉम हाउस प्रॉपर्टी. इन अ केस ऑफ सेल्फ ऑक्यूपाइड, you cannot have a positive income. You should only have a loss or zero. If you don't get any deductions, it should be zero. If you get some deductions, it should be loss. So that is the kind of situation which will arise in case of self-occupied property. Okay. We will deal with, when we do the sums, you will get to know it more handy. Let's quickly finish this first. Section 25. ये जो अभी हमने 24B में बात किया इंटरेस्ट की डिडक्टिबिलिटी को लेके, ये नहीं डिडक्टेबल है अगर it is payable outside India and tax has not been deducted, which means TDS has not been made on interest payable outside India. And यहाँ पे कोई ऐसा आदमी भी नहीं है who can be treated as an agent of the non-resident. मतलब आपका लेंडर नॉन रेसिडेंट है, आपने इंटरेस्ट बाहर पे किया है, टैक्स काटा भी नहीं, और यहाँ पे भी कोई ऐसा नहीं है जिसको पकड़ के हम उससे रिकवरी कर सके टैक्स का. बेसिकली नॉन रेसिडेंट तो हमारे कंट्रोल में नहीं है, तो वी either need to deduct tax at source, then the money is with the department, or we need to have somebody who can be treated as agent of the non-resident and money can be recovered from that person. If none of this is available, then we don't know who your lender was. We are not able to verify. His income is also not taxable because he may perhaps not file a return. तो इनकम टैक्स डिपार्टमेंट के पर्सपेक्टिव से आप देखो तो उसका इनकम शायद टैक्स होगा ही नहीं. तो आपको क्यों डिडक्शन मिलेगा? फिर आपको भी इंटरेस्ट का डिडक्शन नहीं मिलेगा. दैट्स हाउ दे मेंटेन अ क्विड प्रो को, कि अगर हम यहाँ से इनकम नहीं टैक्स कर सकते तो हम यहाँ पे आपको डिडक्शन भी नहीं देना चाहेंगे. ऑलराइट, वन क्विक तड़का अबाउट द इंटरेस्ट. अगर आपने कंस्ट्रक्शन ऑफ हाउस प्रॉपर्टी के लिए लोन लिया है, तो देयर इज सर्टेन टाइम जब कंस्ट्रक्शन चलता रहता है और प्रॉपर्टी कंप्लीट नहीं है. लोन तो चल रहा है, प्रॉपर्टी कंप्लीट नहीं है. अब ऐसे में हम क्या करें? तो प्री कंस्ट्रक्शन इंटरेस्ट इसको बोलते हैं. मतलब लोन चालू, कंस्ट्रक्शन नॉट कंप्लीट, एंड इन बिटवीन वी आर अज्यूमिंग 5 years, बिकॉज उतना ही उन लोगों ने आपको अलाउ, मतलब दे एज पर लॉ देयर इज अ लिमिट कि आप दे वांट यू टू फिनिश द प्रॉपर्टी विद इन 5 years ऑफ टेकिंग द लोन. तो प्री कंस्ट्रक्शन इंटरेस्ट मतलब when the loan has been taken but the property is not complete, that is allowable as deduction in 5 equal installments from the previous year of completion of construction. मतलब वो अक्रू पहले हो रहा है. अब आपकी प्रॉपर्टी कंप्लीट ही नहीं है तो आप उसका क्या ही इनकम फ्रॉम लेट आउट और सेल्फ ऑक्यूपाई कुछ भी नहीं करेंगे, आप उसको कंप्यूटेशन में लेंगे ही नहीं. जब से कंप्लीट होगा तब से आप लेना चालू करेंगे. और जब आपने लिया उस समय आप देखेंगे आपका पुराना कुछ इंटरेस्ट है जो आपने पहले नहीं क्लेम किया, क्योंकि देयर वाज नथिंग टू एडजस्ट इट अगेंस्ट. नाउ यू विल टेक इट एज 1/5 करके 5 equal installments starting from the year in which the property is complete. Okay, is this clear? And if a portion of the property is let out, a portion of the property is self-occupied, then you treat them as two properties and apply the provisions independently. Clear? Okay. Unrealized rent, arrears or co-own property. This is a little bit more to it. We are coming to section 25A. मतलब आपने अगर पहले आपने कभी सोचा था, मतलब रेंट अनरिकवरेबल लग रहा था, रूल 4 के कंडीशंस मीट किए थे, आपने एक्चुअल रेंट से उसको कम कर दिया था. सो देयर वाज सम अनरियलाइज्ड रेंट व्हिच यू कुड नॉट रिकवर अर्लियर एंड यू रिड्यूस्ड इट फ्रॉम द एक्चुअल रेंट. Now you suddenly received, it's like a bad debt recovery. You did not expect you will get it. And by this time, you may have also transferred the property. That means by this time, you may not be the owner of the property also. But it relates to a period when you were the owner and that person was the tenant and he's giving you those arrears now. Now what to do? In that year, subject to rule 4, you must have reduced it from actual rent. So in this year, please tax it now. Okay? So it is going to be taxed. This is an exception where आप receipt basis पे rent को tax कर रहे हैं. Normally rent received और receivable accrual basis पे taxable होता है, actual rent. Okay? ये केस है जब receipt basis पे taxable करते हैं. तो जो भी items cash basis हो जाते हैं ना, please remember them separately, because they are exceptions. Normal basis even followed in income tax is mercantile. Okay, but this unrealized rent is an example of cash basis of account taxation. Municipal tax deduction is an example of cash basis of deduction. Remember these exceptions. Okay, so taxable in the year of receipt, and अपने ऊपर include किया तो आपको नीचे 30% standard deduction देना होगा. पर this is not standard deduction under section 24B. आप लिखेंगे 30%, लेकिन आप 24B मत लिखना साथ में. This is prescribed under 25A. ये एक अलग फ्रेमवर्क है. रेट सेम है, डिस्काउंट का परसेंटेज सेम है, पर डिस्काउंट सेम ऑफर में नहीं आया है. So it's not under the same section. You do a 30% discounting, but do not refer 24B when you are calculating this. Okay. Taxable, even if the assessee is not the owner of the property in the year of receipt or realization, like I told you, by now you may have even sold the property, but if you have received something which you should have received earlier and at that time you were the owner, then please do not say कि भाई ownership ही नहीं है, कैसे IFH पे कैसे होगा? होगा, अभी भी होगा. Okay. This was an exception to ownership. Ownership नहीं भी होने से कब आप कर सकते हैं? This was an exception. और है deemed ownership. जब लीगल ओनरशिप नहीं भी होने से आप कब कर सकते हैं? दिस वी विल डील इन द नेक्स्ट स्लाइड. अच्छा, को ओन्ड प्रॉपर्टी. व्हाट हैपेंस अगर प्रॉपर्टी दो जन मिल के ओन करते हैं? सेक्शन 26. अगर वो प्रॉपर्टी सेल्फ ऑक्यूपाइड है तब फिर एनुअल वैल्यू तो सभी के लिए निल है, कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं है. और रहा डिडक्शन इंटरेस्ट का, बोथ ऑफ देम हैव इंडिपेंडेंट लिमिट्स. You take your 30,000. So basically, I will tell you 30,000 to lakh. These are not property-based limits. These are assessee-based limits. आपको इतना मिला है, आप उसको कोई भी प्रॉपर्टी में यूज करें, प्रॉपर्टी के एक पार्ट के लिए यूज करें, they don't care. Your annual limit is this much. It is assessee limit, not property limit. Okay. Let out property. अगर 2 जन मिलके एक लेट आउट प्रॉपर्टी को ओन कर रहे हैं तो आप लोग अपना इनकम को स्प्लिट कर लो इन द फेयरेस्ट वे पॉसिबल। अगर सब में बोला है कि एक प्रॉपर्टी है विथ सेम एरिया के 2 फ्लैट्स, 1 फ्लोर, फर्स्ट फ्लोर, सेकंड फ्लोर, तो आपने एक एक ए ओन करता है, एक बी ओन करता है, सो वील अज्यूम कि 50% में ही इनकम स्प्लिट होगा। सो इफ दे टेल यू कि 1/4, दे गिव यू सम रेशियो, you apply that ratio and split the rent. Okay. If they give you nothing, you assume 50% perhaps and give a note, right? So generally they will give you in what, ratio you should apportion, or take clues like, itna square feet area ye hai, itna square feet area wo hai. So you find out a ratio using that. Okay. Basically, law has not given you how to apportion. They have left it to you that you should use a reasonable scientific way to apportion income between the co-owners, right? Generally rent agreement में भी होता ही होगा ना. If there's a rent agreement, it will be clear on paper that how much is owned by whom, because it's a very critical concept. But you don't get agreements to study in the exam, so here you will have to take cues from the question itself. Okay. Deemed ownership section 27. ये है वो टिपिकल केस जो क्वेश्चंस में शायद कभी आए भी नहीं, पर अगर आए तो आपको एक थ्योरी क्वेश्चन आ सकता है कि आप बताओ व्हाट आर द केसेस व्हेन the person is not the legal owner but is deemed to be the owner and hence brought within the ambit of income from house property. Okay, 1 is transferor of the property. अगर property is transferred to spouse or minor child, इसमें 2 exceptions है. मतलब अगर आपने अपनी स्पाउस को या फिर अपने माइनर चाइल्ड को एक प्रॉपर्टी दे दिया तो इफेक्टिवली आप ही उसका डिसीजन मेकिंग करेंगे, और ऐसा इन लोग अज्यूम करते हैं, और इसीलिए आपके ही पास में ओनरशिप माना जाएगा. ओके, बट इफ द प्रॉपर्टी इज ट्रांसफर टू स्पाउस इन कनेक्शन विद डिवोर्स, अग्रीमेंट टू लिव अपार्ट, या फिर प्रॉपर्टी इज ट्रांसफर टू मैरिड माइनर डॉटर, देन लॉ थिंक्स इट इज आउट ऑफ योर कंट्रोल नाउ and therefore you will not be deemed to be the owner. Okay. Next, if there is an impartible estate which cannot be partitioned. So estate ka holder, if it cannot be partitioned, then the holder of the estate will be deemed to be the individual owner of all the properties comprised in the estate. And if there is a cooperative society or company or association, which is, जो complexes होते हैं, building के complexes, if they are like a cooperative society or something, तो फिर member of that society will be deemed to be the owner of the building or part thereof under a house building scheme. And if you are in possession of a property in performance of a contract under section 53A of the Transfer of Property Act, you need not know what this section is because it is not in your syllabus. But if it is there, just remember this, that is also one thing that will constitute deemed ownership. Possession of a property under 53A of Transfer of Property Act. And then if you have lease right in a property for not less than 12 years, at least 12 साल का अगर आपके पास किसी का लीज है तो आप समझ लो आप ही deemed owner है. Okay. और इसमें वो लोग एक्सेप्शन बोलते हैं that if you take periodical lease, जैसे आपने देखा होगा 11 months lease is very popular. 11 months कर करके अगर आप 13 साल तक भी रिन्यू कर रहे हैं, then it is not a problem, because at a time if your lease period is less than 12 months, you break the lease, then you renew it. Okay, then it is okay. You can stretch it for more than 12 years also and it will not be considered to be deemed ownership. All right. Just to remember these cases in a small way, because ये typical cases हैं, you need something to remember these if you are asked to write. So I have made one shortened form. SME PLC. SME, small medium enterprises वाला SME. PLC is a common addressing word for public limited companies, at least outside India, in many countries outside India. So SME PLC के नाम से आप इसको याद कर सकते हैं. S means spouse, spouse को प्रॉपर्टी दे दिया. M means minor daughter, minor child को प्रॉपर्टी दे दिया. E means estate, impartible estate holder. P means possession under the Transfer of Property Act. L means lease right in property for not less than 12 years. And C means member of cooperative society. Okay, so SME PLC is the way. There are six cases of deemed ownership, and these are 6 letters for you to remember it in a small way. All right, so we have, with 45 minutes across this section, we have covered the recap and we can dive into problems. If you have anything, please ask right now. Okay, like we did in the last class, we are taking a 2-3 minutes break. Please go to the washroom, come back, and then when we get into problems, we will do uninterrupted. Okay. So this is only a washroom break. Please do not waste more time. Come back as soon as possible. Okay. Shoaib, yes, Shoaib. बोलिए. Shoaib raised hand. So we are back. How many of you are back? Please let me know. We will start. 2 participants raised hand. Is it a sign that you are back? If it is anything else, please let me know. Chalo, whoever is back, thank you for being on time, and we respect your time. We respect your punctuality. So please start reading the question. The deck was uploaded on the portal, so you can keep it downloaded with you. It will be easier for you to read the question while I move to the solution page. Okay. It is question number 1, slide number 13 on that deck. Please see. अच्छा, मैंने एक चीज तो बोला ही नहीं, डिफॉल्ट रेजिम और ऑप्शनल रेजिम का डिफरेंस. क्वेश्चंस करते करते अभी बता देंगे. दिस क्वेश्चन इज ऑन ऑप्शनल रेजिम. सो ऑप्शनल में अभी तक मैंने जो बोला सब कुछ ऑप्शनल के लिए वैलिड है. आप सब कुछ यूज करें. डिफॉल्ट में कुछ एक्सेप्शंस होंगे व्हिच आई विल टेल यू व्हेन द क्वेश्चन कम्स. चलो. How many of you have read the question? Papi Lahiri owns a house in Kolkata during the previous year 23-24, which is the relevant year for you. 3/4 portion of the house was self-occupied and 1/4 portion was let out for residential purpose at a rent of 12,000 per annum per month. 12,000 per month. Okay. The tenant vacated the property on 28 February and the property was vacant during March. 28 February मतलब पूरा February तो उन्होंने यूज किया ही है, बस उन्होंने लास्ट में जाके उसको नहीं यूज किया है. और मार्च में वेकेंट रहा. So rent for the months of Jan, Feb could not be realized. So there is a case where you have 1 month of vacancy, मतलब accrue ही नहीं होता rent, and 2 months of unrealized rent. where all the conditions under Rule 4 are satisfied. What were the 4 conditions? Wash rule, bona fide tenancy, and BO for bona fide, S for steps taken to recover, C for case filed, and for H for no other house property in possession of the landlord, of the tenant, right? So वो conditions सब meet हो गए हैं, तो ये unrealized के conditions meet हो गए हैं. So we can reduce the we can reduce the unrealized rent from the actual rent. Yes, Pooja? Pooja, you want to say something? अभी ठीक है? अभी वॉइस क्लियर है? हेलो? हेलो, अभी वॉइस क्लियर है? अभी क्लियर नहीं है? हेलो? अच्छा, ओके, फाइन. यस, अजय. यस, अजय. हेलो, अजय.
Yes, ma'am, you are audible.
अच्छा, just audible. So sorry for the inconvenience. Just a second. Hello. Just I'm really sorry for the inconvenience. A background sound maybe for another 5 minutes आपको trouble करे. Please try to read the question and be with me. See the screen. Try to be with me, please. Okay. All right. सो ठीक है, अनरियलाइज रेंट हमने पढ़ लिया. म्यूनिसिपल वैल्यू प्रॉपर्टी का गिवन है. दीज आर ऑल पर एनम. तो आप देखना कहाँ पे पर मंथ है, कहाँ पे पर एनम है. बी केयरफुल अबाउट दैट. फेयर रेंट, स्टैंडर्ड रेंट सब आपको दिया हुआ है. म्यूनिसिपल टैक्स का वैल्यू दिया हुआ है. ही पेड, हु पेड? वकील लाहिरी. ओनर पेड, ओनर एक्चुअली पेड. सो फाइन, दिस इज डिडक्टेबल, नो प्रॉब्लम. लोन वॉज टेकन बाय हिम ड्यूरिंग वेरी ओल्ड ईयर 2014 फॉर एक्वायरिंग दिस प्रॉपर्टी. उस बात को बहुत साल हो गए. ओके. और प्रॉपर्टी कब कंप्लीट हुआ है ये तो कोई मेंशन नहीं है, तो बट इट्स अ वेरी ओल्ड लोन. ओके. एंड इंटरेस्ट ऑन लोन इज स्टिल बीइंग पेड. ओके. सो कंप्यूट पप्पी लाइरीज. इफ इट्स अ वेरी ओल्ड लोन तो शायद प्री कंस्ट्रक्शन इंटरेस्ट का कुछ आएगा नहीं, क्योंकि वो तो 5 years तक ही रेलिवेंट होता है. Puppy Lahiri's income from house property for this assessment year, assuming he has shifted out of the default regime. That means he is still in the optional regime. Okay, or rather he is in the optional regime. He is shifted out of the default regime. तो अब हमको बताना है कि कैसे कैलकुलेट करना है. So I hope by now you have read the question and we are going to now solve the problem. अच्छा, सबसे पहले हमें पता चला कि इस प्रॉपर्टी के 2 पार्ट्स हैं. यूनिट 1 विथ 3/4 एरिया एंड यूनिट 2 विथ 1/4 एरिया. 3/4 में वो खुद रहते हैं, 1/4 उन्होंने लेट आउट किया हुआ है. ओके. तो हमने बोला था इफ देर इज एनी रीजनेबल वे in which you get in the sum that you can apportion, you can think that they are 2 different properties, then try to do. तो 3/4 प्रॉपर्टी को हम हाउस प्रॉपर्टी 1 मानेंगे और 1/4 प्रॉपर्टी को हम हाउस प्रॉपर्टी 2 मानेंगे और इस सम को करेंगे एज यूजुअल. ओके. ठीक है. सो 3/4 इज सेल्फ ऑक्यूपाइड प्रॉपर्टी इन एन ऑप्शनल टैक्स रेजिम. तो एनुअल वैल्यू क्या होना चाहिए? इफ एनीबडी कैन राइट एनुअल वैल्यू क्या होना चाहिए? इफ यू कैन अनम्यूट देम से. There's a 3/4 self-occupied property. What should be the annual value? We have all the numbers. Municipal value is that. We have all the numbers. What should be the annual value? Anybody? Yes. Somebody raised hand. आप please unmute करके बोले. Because chat function disabled है. Hello. 5, 6. A lot of participants have raised hand. Can you please unmute and say any one of them?
Madam, this out
Yes.
of 450, 470 is the maximum. 470, 5 lakhs, 470 is the lower. From 470, we have to make 1/4, and 1,08,000 is the actual rent realized. So out of these two, out of 470 by 4 and this 1,08,000, we have to take 1,08,000 as actual rent.
Anybody else with a different view? If you-
Annual value is nil, ma'am. Self-occupied.
Yes, absolutely correct. Sir, Kiran Kumar sir, there were a lot of values given in the question, but are they relevant? This is a self-occupied property. आप gross annual
No,
value
for
का क्या
1/4, I told me. For 1/4, 1,08,000 is.
Yeah. For 1/4, that's a separate. We are right now talking about 3/4. We are treating them as two properties. One is the self-occupied part, 3/4 of it, and one is the let out part, 1/4 of it.
3/4 is
Talking
0,
about
1/4 is 1,08,000.
Okay. So we are right now on the self-occupied. The gross annual value is nil. 24A deduction is also nil. Now we come to 24B. So there is a loan taken, right? There is an interest on loan. Optional regime में तो वो मिलता भी है, allowed है. Okay, let's see. 3/4 आपका अगर loan है, the loan value is 1,51,000. The interest value on the loan is 1,51,000. But remember, this loan is for the entire property. We are only dealing with the 3/4 property right now. So इसका हम 3/4 कर देंगे. इसका 3/4 करने से we come to a value. Okay. And after that, we'll see that what can we do with that. How much is the 3/4? Whether it is up to 30,000 or up to 2 lakhs, what is it? So because this was a loan taken for which purpose? It was a loan taken for acquiring the property. So self-occupied property, optional regime, loan taken for acquiring the property में कितना and you assume that certificate available है 5 साल के अंदर property complete हो गया था. Okay, so if you assume all that, which you mention in the notes that we've assumed all that, then the amount of interest allowed कितना है? आपको कितना मिल सकता है in this case?
Ma'am, 2 lakhs.
Up to 2 lakhs is allowed. So we'll calculate 1,51,000 का 3/4 and we see it is less than 2 lakhs. So fine, the entire thing is allowed. Now we come to the unit 2, which is 1/4 area, which is let out. अब अपने जो भी सब हमने समझा था, म्युनिसिपल वैल्यू, फेयर रेंट, स्टैंडर्ड रेंट, हम सबको अप्लाई करके देखेंगे कि कैसे होगा जीएवी. जीएवी निकालने के लिए वी फर्स्ट नीड टू फाइंड आउट एक्सपेक्टेड रेंट. एक्सपेक्टेड रेंट के लिए हमारे पास है 3 पैरामीटर्स. लेट अस सी हाउ दे इंटरप्ले. तो हम पहले लेंगे हायर ऑफ म्युनिसिपल वैल्यू और फेयर रेंट. अब सारे वैल्यूज पर एनम है, पर पूरे प्रॉपर्टी के लिए है. You have to prorate it based on the unit which you are seeing. Right now you are seeing 1/4 property. So आप सबको 1/4 कर देंगे. Okay, for you to understand things better. So municipal value का 1/4 कर दिया, fair rent का 1/4 कर दिया, standard rent का 1/4 कर दिया, और ये सारे values मिल गए. Okay. You also keep writing on your pen and paper. You use your calculator and derive this. So when you get these values, the rules are that you first compare the municipal value with fair rent and see which of them is higher. So the higher value is 117,500. Then you compare this with standard rent and say which of these is lower. So the lower is 117,500. So the expected rent, which is the outcome of this, is 117,500. Okay. उसके बाद हम आएंगे next step में in derivation of GAV, which is the actual rent. एक्चुअल रेंट में यहाँ पे थोड़ा ट्विस्ट है कि 1 मंथ वेकेंसी और 2 मंथ अनरियलाइज्ड रेंट. तो इफेक्टिवली कितने मंथ्स ऑक्यूपाइड हुए? कितने
9
मंथ्स यू रियली रिकवर, यू एक्सपेक्ट रेंट टू बी रिकवर्ड?
9 months.
9 months. So 1 month is you did not don't even intend to recover, and 2 months is you want to recover. You took steps on under rule 4, but you could not recover. So overall 3 months we'll have to reduce. and we will have actual rent for 9 months. So if we calculate actual rent for 9 months, it comes to this much at the rate of 12,000 per month. Okay. अब स्टेप 3 हम GAV निकालेंगे, जिसके लिए हम ER और AR को कंपेयर करते हैं. Now remember, when we calculate GAV, they said please check if the actual rent is lower than expected rent because of vacancy. How do we check it? अगर actual rent अगर एक month vacant नहीं हुआ होता, then what would have been the actual rent? We have to calculate that. Okay. Then we need to compare with expected rent for the whole year. So actual rent is 1,08,000. But if there was no vacancy, then how many more months of rent would you have got? 1 more month. Because 2 months are unrealized. The tenant has run away. But 1 month he was there, he was not there at all. You cannot even hold him if he comes back to you. Right? So 1 month is the vacancy wala period. If the property was not vacant in that period, then the annual rent would have been, the actual rent would have been 1,20,000, right? Now you compare these two. So you see that the actual rent without vacancy would be higher than expected rent. And it is only that with vacancy, the actual rent is lower than expected rent. In this case, the gross annual value will be what?
Actual rent.
Actual rent. And the actual wala actual rent. मतलब not the actual rent without vacancy. ये तो खाली numerical number है. Right? Actual wala actual rent will be taken. मतलब 1,08,000. आप भूल से 1,20,000 मत ले लेना. I am telling you practical things which people tend to do. ठीक है, higher of the two के मतलब उस frenzy में हम लोग बस higher जो मिलता है ले लेते हैं. We have calculated without vacancy and actual rent only to see whether we need to take actual rent. But if we need to take actual rent, we will take the actual rent. We will not take the prorated actual rent which we have calculated. Okay. So we have to take 1,08,000.
during vacancy, during tenant vacated, if self-occupied means we have to take 120, madam, here.
Yeah. Tenant vacated only for 1 month and 2 months he went away.
In case if it is self-occupied during that month, then we have to take here figure 120 as if it is occupied.
I mean, it otherwise wouldn't have made any sense. It's not to treat the vacancy period as self-occupied or anything.
No, I'm telling other case, madam, not here, our problem case. Just for assumption, I'm telling. In case of it was happened, I'm telling.
I'm sorry, I didn't get your question.
Here, during the tenant vacated at that time, the house is kept vacant. If the house is self-occupied during that period, we have to take it as a notional rent, and that 12,000 we have to add, and this year actual rent will be 120. That I'm telling.
If part of the year property is let out and part of the year property is self-occupied, then you need to deal with it in that category.
That I'm telling.
You deal with it in that category that part of the year is self-occupied and part of the year is let out. In that case, what you do is you take expected rent for the whole year and you compare the actual rent for the let out period only. Okay, you compare them, whichever is higher, you reduce municipal taxes paid for the whole year. That is the prescribed way to calculate income from house property in case it is let out for part of the year and self-occupied for another part of the year. Okay. Expected rent for full year, actual rent for let out period. You compare them. That's not a case of vacancy. So you compare them. Whichever is higher, you take them. And then you reduce the municipal taxes paid for the full year because that is allowed on payment basis to the assessee. So it doesn't matter if part of the year it was let out, self-occupied. Okay, otherwise you wouldn't have got. But because it is, allowed on payment basis in case of let out, then even if for part of the year it was let out, you will get it for full year. Okay, so be very careful over there. Thank you that you asked it. This is a very important, normal things to everybody understands. But whenever there is a twist to the question that 2 people are owning the property or there are 2 parts of the property, one self-occupied, one let out, or there is one property, part of the year self-occupied, part of the year let out, then what happens? So be careful with these tricks, these twists in the circumstances. Okay. All right. So here you compare 1,08,000 with 1,17,500 and you, in this case, actual rent is lower because of vacancy. So actual rent will be taken. Now we have got the GAV. So GAV is the actual rent in this case because of reasons mentioned above. Now to derive NAV from GAV, what do we need to reduce? Who will tell?
Municipal taxes,
Municipal taxes.
11,250.
11,250. Absolutely, because you need to take the portion relating to the let out portion, right? Had it been let out for a part of the year, but full property, you would have taken the full municipal tax. But because it is let out for only, because only one part is let out, whether for full or half year, okay? Only one part is let out, therefore you will prorate the municipal taxes. These are very little things, but if you go wrong in any one step, your final result will be, wrong, right? And you will lose out a lot of step marks. Net annual value, wrong. Income from house property, standard, those things, everything else will fall in place, everything else will go wrong, especially if it's an MCQ question. Then, first two areas, if you go wrong, then C, D, E most likely will be wrong. So please be careful. Okay, where you prorate municipal taxes and where you do not prorate municipal taxes is very important. You remember, write it down somewhere. Municipal tax full year if property let out for part of the year also. But municipal tax prorated if part of the property let out for full year also. Anybody if you are you on the same page as me? If full property is let out, time period is a problem, then full municipal tax will be taken. But if part of the property is let out, period being anything, full or part year, then prorated part municipal tax will be taken. Basically, municipal tax claim is linked to the property and not time period. The extent of property, 100% of property let out for part of the year, 100% municipal tax allowed. But 1/5 of the 50% of the property let out for full year, then only 50% municipal tax allowed. So it is linked to property area and not the time period for which it was let out. Are we all on the same page? Okay. Coming to, after we have got NAV, we are calculating deductions under section 24.
30%.
30%, this is a let out property. We will calculate 30%, very good, of NAV. And NAV we have got as 96750. Okay. Then we will reduce interest on borrowed capital. We will calculate 1/4 of 1,51,000 and we have got this. Any limits on interest on borrowed capital claim from let out property?
No.
Should we compare it with 30,000, 2 lakh, anything?
No.
No limits at all. Okay. Just claim whatever you got. So you reduced all the reductions and you got an outcome which is positive or negative. It is still positive. Okay. So the total income from house property is unit 1 plus unit 2. If you
We can
add the
set up.
loss from above and the gain from below, the net
We can
result
set up.
is this.
We can set up.
This is a loss case. Now we are under the optional regime. Optional regime, loss from income from house property is eligible to be set off against any other head. But had it been the default regime, then loss from house property even this is subject to a limit of 2 lakhs. Even in optional regime, the amount to which the loss from house property can be set off against income from any other head, the limit is 2 lakhs. Only up to 2 lakhs of loss you can set off. Okay. But had it been default regime, then loss from income from house property head cannot be set off against income from any other head. Okay. We are in the optional regime, so we have only talked about optional cases. That means you can allow up to 2 lakhs, you can claim as loss and set off against anything else. Is it okay? Please do not confuse this 2 lakh with the 24B limit of 2 lakhs. This is limit on loss from self-occupied property that can be adjusted against income from any other head. And that is limit on deduction under 24B that can be allowed in case of self-occupied property. Okay, both are pertinent to optional regime because both are difficult in default regime. But do not get confused. Incidentally, they are both 2 lakhs. Otherwise, they are separate limits. In separate contexts, they are limits. Okay. Acha, one thing I wanted to say, which is there in your study module, so you should also give a note. what we did above, that unrealized rent we reduced from actual rent. If you remember, when we calculated 1,08,000, we took 12,000 into 9. That means by default in our mind, what we did 12,000 into 12 minus 12,000 into 2 for unrealized purposes. That means we reduced 2 months of unrealized rent from actual rent itself. But in the income tax return, when you file income tax return, the utility allows you to reduce unrealized rent from the gross annual value, which means after you have taken the higher of expected rent, actual rent, you derive gross annual value. From there, they allow you to take a deduction of unrealized rent. Okay. So that is a more beneficial approach because you've already taken whichever is higher and then you are further allowed the deduction. So that is allowed in the income tax return utility. Therefore, that is also a possible view that somebody can take because that utility has also been made by income tax department. But if we go strictly by the literature of the law, then our feeling is or our view is that it should be reduced from actual rent. Therefore, we do in the sums that we reduce from actual rent, but we write in the note that income tax utility allows you to do it from GAV also. So even if you do that, it's okay. Okay.
In future, if that 24,000 is realized, then 30% deduction is available, madam.
But see, anyway, GAV will be reduced and then on NAV you will calculate 30% deduction. So whether you reduce in the above limb or the below limb, 30% will be NAV.
അല്ലാതെ വെയിറ്റിംഗ് എവിടെ നമ്മുടെ കമന്റ് കൊടുക്കുന്നത്
Okay. Coming to the next, if this sum is okay, then we are going to the next sum. Okay, if somebody doesn't want to be heard, please mute yourself if you don't want to be heard. Okay. All right, thank you. Okay, so I am assuming question number 1, everybody is fine with that. That was a case of part of the year, part of the property let out and part of the property self-occupied. It was that kind of a case. I'll just put it here. Part property let out, part self-occupied, and under optional region. Now let's do case number 2. Okay, please read it. Slide number 24 or slide number 14 on your on the deck available on your portal. I am reading very quickly because we cannot spend too much time reading the questions right now. But in your examinations, please read them carefully. Reutilize your reading time in the most judicious manner possible. Okay. Mr. Amitabh, a resident in India, owns 2 house properties, one in Delhi, one in Kanpur. Okay. Property in Kanpur is self-occupied. Property in Delhi is let out. Very good. Particulars of Delhi house, which means particulars of let out house, are as under standard rent, municipal value, fair rent, they are all in per annum. And rent received, actual rent, it is in per month. Fine, we will calculate. Municipal tax, which is paid by Mr. Amitabh, which means the owner himself, is this much. Fine, we have to calculate it, we'll calculate. And then it is paid and it's paid by the owner. These 2 things are enough for us and we will use it. Okay. Municipal tax paid by Mr. Amitabh on 10th June for Kanpur house is this much. So Kanpur, remember, is the self-occupied house and you have paid some municipal taxes. It's not relevant for us. Anyway, so we'll park that okay, this is not relevant for us. Mr. Amitabh had taken a loan from SBI of 35 lakhs at 12% per annum in April 2021 for purchase of Delhi house. So Delhi is the let out house. For let out house, he has an interest on loan which is going on. Okay. All right. Stamp duty value of this house was 40 lakhs. Okay. He purchased a plot in Kanpur. What will we do with stamp duty value? Let's see if that is relevant because so far it is not looking like relevant. Okay. Mr. Amitabh purchased a plot in Kanpur in May 2021 and construction began in June 2021. Okay. So for the Kanpur house, he purchased the plot in May. Construction began in June. Completed on December 22. That means construction completed within 5 years. And for that also, he took a loan. So he took a loan and we assume certificate is available. And the construction, he took a loan for construction. We assume certificate is available. You should mention in the notes. And construction is also complete within 5 years of taking the loan. So very good. All right, that's good. No repayment has been done so far for both the loans, which means that the entire principal value, you need to calculate interest on the entire outstanding balance, because that is the principal value has not been reduced. Okay. Acha, one thing, interest on unpaid interest is not deductible. So it's the principal value which you will take. Interest on unpaid interest is not deductible. But if you take a loan to pay another loan, then that new loan also becomes part of the calculation. Okay, so interest on a loan taken to repay the earlier loan is deductible, but interest on unpaid interest is not deductible. Okay, all right. During the previous year, 2023-24, Amitabh earned a salary of income of this much. Compute his income under both the regimes. Very good. So the nuances of what happens in optional, what happens in default, you will get to know in this sum, because on side by side, you will compare what happens if he chooses either regime, and then you advise which regime he should actually choose. Okay, please remember, for individuals, HUFs, I mean this 115 BSc scheme, you can elect every year. Okay, so it's a very good thing. Every year you see, acha, this works out better, now let me use this. Okay, so every year you can choose what you want to do. Great. Okay. Okay, so if this type of case, I would term it as both regimes question, which you should definitely see. Both regimes and both types of property, self-occupied as well as let out. You will get a complete understanding. It's a very good sum. Chalo, I hope everything is clear to you. Let us start. Question number 2. Please take out your pen and paper and calculator. Let us start. Okay, we have made two columns, actually three columns within each head, because we will need some inner columns and outer columns. So this is a standard template which you should, make before proceeding, because as in when you keep doing the sum, you'll realize, I needed one more inner column. At that time, where will you make it? And you'll cancel it, and then you will make the whole table again on another page. Okay, why I'm saying all this is because we have done all this. We have learned from our mistakes. So I hope you learn from our mistakes and you don't do the mistakes again. Please, by default, keep space for 3 inner columns. 3 columns in each regime that you're doing. If you are in any way type of comparing two things, please keep 3 inner columns for each. Okay. Now, it will help you to use in case you need, and you can leave it blank in case you don't need. Okay. But at least once you're half the way in the sum and then you think, I need another column, from where will you bring it? It's not an Excel sheet that you insert a column. It's a paper. You will not be able to do it. That's why this is my advice to you. Okay. Income from salaries, let's start with that. So we know that he is earning an income of 18 lakhs from salary, which is gross salary. In both the regimes, it is taxable. What should we do to find out the taxable income from salaries? Any kind of adjustment which you can think of? Anything you remember from the last class?
60,000 standard deduction.
Which regime should we give? Optional?
Both.
Yes. So there was a time when it was only under optional, but now, under the provisions other than 115 BSc. But now it is in both. For you, it is in both. So for you, that is relevant. Yes, you get it in both and you find out the income from salaries. So there is absolutely no difference in the level of income from salaries under both the regimes in this particular case. Okay. All right. Acha, this reminds me the fact that in the last question, somebody asked me that please give us an acronym to remember the adjustments to do between default and new regime and the optional regime when we are calculating income from salaries. That is, which kind of items are allowed, which kind of items are different in treatment between old and new regimes, or default and optional regimes. So I have made an acronym for that, and it's there on your, it's uploaded on the portal also. I've updated the deck with that acronym, and it's there on the portal. When you see, you will be able to understand, if you see that slide, that what is the acronym and how it will help you to remember. In short, it is SHE-HELP kind of an acronym that I've made, and I don't want to divert right now, otherwise I would have given the details. It's just a mention that when you want to see that, you please go to that deck. It's updated now. Just download and check that slide. Okay. All right. Income from house property, let's start with Delhi. Delhi is the one which is let out. So for our ease, let's write what is let out. And for our ease, just write what is rented property. Okay, we've already mentioned. And the Kanpur property is self-occupied. Okay. So let's see the first, this is the default regime that we are talking about. Okay. So default regime and income from let out property. Any difference in calculation in the default regime or normal regime or optional regime, that is for let out property? My question to you is,
Interest exemption.
for let out property, is there any difference in the way you
No,
calculate?
there is no difference in it.
There's no difference. So you calculate expected rent, you calculate actual rent, you do it for one of the regimes and you copy it to another. It's okay. Okay. So we calculate expected rent first. Expected rent will be the higher of fair rent or municipal value subject to standard rent. All the numbers are given in the question. So we take them to be this. What have you got as expected rent? Any one of you?
1,72,000.
Perfect. Okay. Then we calculate the actual rent. Any case of vacancy, unrealized rent, any kind of problems?
No, ma'am.
No. So for 12 months, we calculate at the monthly rent given, 15,000 per month. Okay. So, okay. Now, if there is no case of vacancy, is there any trouble finding the GAV, or will it be a simple ER or AR, whichever is higher?
It is simple, ma'am. GAV will be 1,80,000.
Absolutely correct. Okay, higher of above. So now to calculate NAV, what do we need to reduce?
Municipal taxes.
Is it paid by the owner?
Yes, ma'am.
So 5% municipal valuation, that is the municipal tax, and therefore you reduce it. Okay, there is no thumb rule that 5% of municipal valuation is what you need to reduce. It is in the question, it is mentioned that municipal tax is 5% of municipal value. Okay, please don't get confused. All right. Okay, net annual value is the net result. So which is this? Up tak we have found them to be the same, right? Because in principle, we agreed at the beginning that in case of a let out property, you will find no difference in the two regimes. Okay. Acha, standard deduction under section 24A, 30%. Will you give them?
Yes, ma'am.
Interest on borrowed capital. What do you think? Because this we are talking about the rented property. There was a loan taken and it's been very long. There is some interest. Please calculate that and let me know how much of interest should be allowed.
4,20,000. Cool.
Sorry.
एक second, ma'am.
Okay. Here there is a catch. Here there is a catch. Why this sum was given. So I will name this as both regimes, both types of property plus 80EE. Okay. Have you studied deductions under chapter 6A already?
Yes, ma'am.
Have you come across any section called 80EE?
Yes. उसमें क्या था कि
क्या
एक
था?
अमाउंट दी हुई उसमें था कि एक अमाउंट दी हुई थी कि अराउंड 50 लाख और 40 लाख दो था उसमें, और अगर आपका स्टैम्प वैल्यू 50 लाख से अबव है तो एक अलग तो शेड्यूल बैंक की अलग इंटरेस्ट रेट लगता था, और 40 लाख है तो अलग इंटरेस्ट रेट लगता था, ऐसा कुछ था।
ओके देखो ये क्यों है, पहले तो व्हाट इज दिस डिडक्शन अबाउट? इट्स अ डिडक्शन अवेलेबल अंडर चैप्टर 6A. Okay, and we know that a lot of, I mean, most of deductions under chapter 6A are not available under the default regime, right? तो सबसे पहले अपने दिमाग में डिफॉल्ट regime से तो इसको निकाल ही देते हैं कि मिलेगा ही नहीं, ठीक है, मिलेगा ही नहीं. It is not available under default tax regime. If the question was only default tax regime, we wouldn't have even been discussing this. But the question is compare both the regimes. That's why we are discussing, because it is relevant for optional regime. So this is a deduction which you get in respect of interest on loan taken for certain house property. Okay. So when you in the question, if you see an optional regime and you see a loan taken and interest on loan taken for a house property, then at least it should ring a bell in your mind that please let me also check section 80EE. It may not be applicable in all cases, but at least you should check. Okay. It will be very good if you can also give a note in the sum that, we have checked the conditions and because of this reason, this is not applicable. It will show how comprehensive your coverage is. Okay. But yes, not at the cost of time. If you're running out of time, don't try to show extra knowledge. Then you please save time. Use it as preciously as possible. Okay. 80EE is in computing the total income of an assessee being an individual. So just remember that mostly also in cases of income from house property, you are given the case of an individual only. So assessee must be individual, not eligible to claim deduction under section 80EE. Okay, suppose it will be given in the sum that is not eligible to claim under 80EE. Otherwise, you need to go and check what 80EE is. Then, in accordance with this section, you can claim interest on loan taken from any financial institution for acquisition of a house property. That means they are allowing you additional deduction for the purpose of loan taken for acquiring a house property. Okay, it shall not exceed 1,50,000 rupees. The maximum cap is 1,50,000 rupees, and it should be allowed from 1st April 2020 onwards. Okay, so for you it is relevant. 1st April 20 onwards, for you it's relevant. The maximum cap is 1,50,000. But you will get if the loan has been sanctioned between 1st April 19 and 31st March 22. Okay, so that is why, if you see that the period when the loan was sanctioned falls in this bracket, then it is relevant, otherwise it is not relevant. So just check the condition.
Madam, that 1,50,000 is not per year, that is the total of the loan. During the entire loan period, that 1,50,000.
In the total loan period?
Yes, madam, it is not per year. It is not per year.
Okay. But what we are seeing here is that suppose we are calculating for one, you will calculate for one assessment year only. You will have to assume that it is not taken in other years. Or you have to have some information in the sum saying that you have already exhausted your limit.
Well, that is okay. Just for clause purpose, I am telling.
Yeah. Okay. And
that is correct, na, madam? Is it correct, na, what I told?
So this thing, what you are saying is that, see, where the deduction is allowed for any interest in in this subsection, it should not be allowed under any other provision for the same or any other assessment year. So
that is for cumulative figure, I am telling. 1,50,000 is a cumulative
figure.
It
is only it is one time. I mean, if you've claimed it in 1 year, you cannot claim it in any other assessment year or under any other section. Why we are thinking when we are calculating 24B? Because 24B is also a deduction for similar kind of thing, na? You claim it once. You cannot claim it there and there and there and everywhere. So that's why it is relevant. How much, if you want to claim something under 80EE, then you don't have to reduce it from 24B. You cannot claim it under all the provisions. Same thing cannot be claimed more than once, right? So here in the sum, we got an information that the loan was sanctioned during this 2019-22 period. And then we saw that the stamp duty value at one place was mentioned that it's 40 lakhs. That means it was less than 45 lakhs. So this condition was also met. Mainly in the sums, if you get a stamp duty value, then that should ring a bell. Because you remember we were discussing the question and we said stamp duty value, why is it given? We don't know. Because normally it's not needed in calculating income from house property. This is only for it to ring a bell in your mind that they want you to see some other section also. So then you think, okay, maybe let me check the conditions of 80EE if that is applicable. Okay. And you should not own any residential house property on the day of sanction of the loan. So when you got this loan, you should not own anything else. That means only one house property you are trying to, you do not have, basically it is for Aam Aadmi trying to acquire loan, that you do not have any other house property. You want to make a house of your own. The value is also very less. It's less than 45 lakhs. And the loan was given during 19 to 22. So it was to promote own houses by Aam Aadmi during that period that this initiative came. Okay.
In the given problem, he is having 2 houses, so this is not applicable, ma'am.
Sorry.
In the given problem, he is having 2 houses, so this is not applicable, I'm telling.
No, so please, they are saying on the day of sanction of loan. You see which loan was taken first.
Okay.
On the
So we
day.
have to assume, we have to assume it. We have to assume.
No, it's there in the facts. You see the question, it's there. The timelines are given, you will be able to understand. See which loan came first. The
Okay,
loan
okay.
for Delhi house was taken in April 2021. But the loan for this house purchased a plot in May 2021 and construct this we are talking about the Delhi house only, na? So Delhi
Yeah.
house was taken in April 2021 and whatever happened in Kanpur was after May. So at the
Okay.
time of April 2021, you did not have Kanpur.
Okay. Then eligible, ma'am.
So these are, I mean, why I said this is a very good sound, such little nuances in the facts which are given. I mean, you have to really read this question 2-3 times to capture all the facts.
लेकिन मैम ये तो लेट आउट प्रॉपर्टी है तो उसका तो सारा 24B में ही मतलब मिल जाता है, उसमें तो कोई लिमिट ही नहीं है मैम, तो 80 की जरूरत ही नहीं है इसमें।
हाँ बट अब इन्होंने मतलब पर क्लेम कर सकते हैं ना, दैट इज ऑल्सो अलाउड टू यू। इसमें क्या होगा अगर आप सारा ले लेते हैं तो देयर मे बी अ केस ऑफ लॉस ऑफ हाउस प्रॉपर्टी जो आपको लिमिट हो जाएगा, मे बी दैट्स व्हाई यू डोंट वांट टू मच टू बी यूज्ड देयर। बट इफ यू गेट अ नॉर्मल डिडक्शन देन वो आपके टोटल जीटीआई से आपको मिलता है। सो मे बी यू नो बिकॉज ही हैज सैलरी इनकम ऑल्सो, सो ही इज एक्सपेक्टिंग कि भाई टोटल में आई शुड गो एंड क्लेम। हियर इफ आई एंड अप विद अ लॉस then I will not be able to set off more than 2 lakhs. That's why let me claim total against GTI.
लेट आउट में कोई लिमिट नहीं है मैम 2 लाख की,
नहीं,
या फिर
लेट आउट में कोई लिमिट नहीं है, लेकिन आपके पास तो सेल्फ ऑक्यूपाइड प्रॉपर्टी भी है, वहां से तो लॉस निकलेगा। तो अगर
यस मैम।
ओवरऑल आपका एक ऐसा सिचुएशन आ जाए कि ओवरऑल आप नेगेटिव में हैं, तो वो उस पे तो कैपिंग है कि आप उसको 2 लाख से ज्यादा कोई और हेड से यूज नहीं कर सकते। समझ रहे हो आप क्या बोल रहे हो? यहाँ पे आपने 420 आप यूज कर सकते थे, जैसे आपने डिफॉल्ट में किया है। जब डिफॉल्ट में कर सकते हैं तो ऑप्शनल में क्यों नहीं कर सकते हैं? आप कर सकते थे, बट मे बी दे हैव थॉट ऑफ समथिंग इन द यू नो सब्सिक्वेंट इट विल कम आउट टू अ सिचुएशन, यू वेट फॉर द सम टू प्रोसीड, it may come to a situation where your overall loss from house property is more than 2 lakhs and you will waste it. So you are thinking that let me reduce the loss from house property and rather use deduction under section 80EA which I can use against GTI, against my overall GTI. Did you understand how we have rationalized?
ओके मैम, ओके अंडरस्टूड।
ये बहुत ही मतलब इंट्रिकेट, ये फर्स्ट शॉट में सही होने का चांस नेग्लिजिबल है unless you understood the nuances. You have, like right now we have done this question, so you'll be careful when you are seeing it in the exam paper. For somebody who has not discussed this, who has not seen this, it is very difficult to apply your mind sitting at that position in the paper. Okay, तो इसमें मतलब बहुत कुछ है, यू शुड गिव देम, मतलब अब आपको तो नहीं पता आगे जाके रिजल्ट नेगेटिव होएगा कि पॉजिटिव होएगा, सो यू हैव टू डू अ फेयर चांस कि अगर ऑप्शनल रिजाइम है तो आप उसको जीटीआई से तो देंगे, तो इनकम फ्रॉम हाउस प्रॉपर्टी भी तो जीटीआई में है, दैट इज द बेस्ट टैक्स पॉसिबल वे ना। इट मे बी अ केस दैट यू आर इनडिफरेंट, आप यहाँ पे ले लेते हैं वहां पे ले, बात एक ही आपके लिए, लेकिन there may be a situation where you land up in loss from house property where you would have to cap it, and that's why perhaps you want to do deductions under chapter 6A, right? Chalo. Okay. So this is the twist in this, and I have marked this as initially I didn't write because you would have got biased. Now I'm disclosing this question was to highlight 80EA interplay with income from house property. Okay. प्लीज जब आपको कुछ कुछ ट्रिगर्स मिलेंगे, जब आपको ये सब ज्यादा सोचना होगा, नॉर्मल सम्स में इतना नहीं सोचना होता है, जब आपको दिखे एक स्टैम्प ड्यूटी वैल्यू आ रहा है 2019 से 22 के बीच में एक हाउस घर लिया जा रहा है, उससे पहले कोई घर ही नहीं था, आपको लगे हाँ हाँ कंडीशंस बिल्ड हो रहे हैं, तब आपने वो सेक्शन अप्लाई करना है। और यस, अगर आपको पहले ही पता है डिफॉल्ट रेजिम हो रहा है, देन प्लीज डोंट अप्लाई योर माइंड एंड वेस्ट योर टाइम, बिकॉज डिफॉल्ट रेजिम में ये सेक्शन मतलब ऐसे भी अवेलेबल नहीं है, एप्लीकेबल हो तो भी। चलो next, so therefore what we have done is We felt that he's eligible for 80EE and therefore we have reduced his 24B deduction from that amount because that section says that you cannot claim this benefit under any other provision or any other assessment year. It's a one-time benefit. पूरा इस साल में ले लो या फिर एक सेक्शन में ले लो तो दूसरे में फिर से नहीं लेना है. All right, like one of our colleagues said that you can, if you have taken in 1 year, you will not take in the other year. We are assuming he has not taken in the earlier years and therefore this year he is eligible. Okay. Because आपको तो एक ही ईयर मिलेगा ना करने को, आप उसी में सब कुछ to the contrary assume कर लेंगे तो एग्जामिनर देखेगा कैसे कि आपने अप्लाई क्या किया. ओके ओके, तो ये सब निकालने के बाद हमें मिला है एक एनएवी. आप देखोगे कि यहाँ पे यही एक लॉस आ गया है. ठीक है, लेट आउट प्रॉपर्टी से लॉस आ गया. आप सोचो कोई कैपिंग नहीं था इंटरेस्ट ऑन हाउसिंग लोन पे, इंटरेस्ट देने के बाद लेट आउट प्रॉपर्टी से लॉस आ गया है. सेल्फ ऑक्यूपाइड से तो वैसे भी आएगा, मतलब या तो जीरो होगा या नेगेटिव होगा. अब ओवरऑल आप कितना नेगेटिव यूज करेंगे? 2 लाख से ज्यादा तो आप ऑप्शनल में भी नहीं कर सकते. नाउ यू अंडरस्टैंड पूजा व्हाई वी वर ट्राइंग टू क्लेम 80EE. ओके
Yes, ma'am.
ओके ऑल राइट. नाउ लेट अस, तो ये वाला हो गया let out property. अब हम self occupied property में आएंगे. Now you will actually see the difference in the two regimes that yes, इन दोनों regimes में self occupied property की calculation कैसे अलग हो जाता है. Let's see, gross annual value में कोई difference? What should be the gross annual value for both the cases? It's a let out, it's a self occupied property.
nil sir.
ठीक है, nobody I assume has any doubt in the fact कि ये तो nil होगा. ओके, और डिडक्शन म्यूनिसिपल टैक्स का आपको नहीं मिलेगा 5% ऑफ म्यूनिसिपल वैल्यू या जो भी हो. ठीक, सो लेट्स टॉक अबाउट डिडक्शंस अंडर 24A स्टैंडर्ड डिडक्शन मिलता ही नहीं है तो वी आर नॉट टॉकिंग अबाउट इट. वी आर ओनली टॉकिंग अबाउट इंटरेस्ट ऑन बोरोड कैपिटल 24B. अब डिफॉल्ट रेजिम में, ऑप्शनल रेजिम में इंटरेस्ट ऑन बोरोड कैपिटल इन दिस केस वेयर लोन इज टेकन फॉर एक्विजिशन ऑफ प्रॉपर्टी, assume that certificate is available and property construction got complete within 5 years of taking the loan. So now you tell me how much deduction should I give you? How much should be the interest deductible under optional regime?
2 lakh rupees.
आपने कैलकुलेट किया कि आपने पूरा लिमिट भी कर दिया उसको खुद ही? आपने लिमिट कर दिया उसका?
No, it is not like that, madam. First we have to arrive total loss from the house property, then finally we have to made for 2 lakhs.
ठीक है, you're right. So if you see over here in the inner column, I have mentioned the amount. Okay, and then I have said it is restricted to 2 lakhs. Okay, so yes, you should because if you don't calculate and just randomly put any amount, तब तो examiner check कैसे करेगा? There are step markings also. You should make notes. You should give remarks why you are doing something. Okay, then that helps to be better understand why you do something. अच्छा, यहाँ पे nobody of you told me that there is a pre-construction period involved and the property is complete within 5 years and it has not been 5 years since the completion of construction. अगर ये सारे circumstances एक साथ में आए तो आपको pre-construction interest का भी treatment examine करना पड़ेगा. That means property was complete within 5 years of taking the loan and after completion 5 years have not lapsed. So you are still eligible to claim interest on the pre-construction period in 5 equal installments. Right? तो आपको 1/5 of pre-construction interest भी लेना चाहिए. This is something that you need to keep in mind. And overall limit interest पे जो है वो है ही, but at least for calculation purpose inner column में तो आप वो calculate करेंगे. So please calculate. ये सब चीज we are not able to guess if you just right away write 2 lakhs because we have not understood whether you have also taken pre-construction interest or not. Therefore, please calculate that. Right? Pre-construction interest होगा 1/5 of 25 lakhs का loan into 10 into 9 months. Okay, तो और उसका 1/5 because 5 equal installments में it comes to 287,500. Does it come like that for all of you? मतलब the pre-construction one comes to 37,400 and total comes to 287,500. Has this working come for all of you? रेगुलर इंटरेस्ट इज 25 लाख पे 10%। वो तो आप लोग ने ले लिया होगा, सबको आ गया होगा ये। इधर ही आपने बोल दिया होगा भाई लिमिटेड टू 2 लाख, काम ही खत्म। अग्रीड है, करेक्ट है, लेकिन फॉर कंप्लीटनेस पर्पस, एग्जामिनेशन पर्पस आपको प्री कंस्ट्रक्शन इंटरेस्ट भी निकालना चाहिए, which is going to be 25 lakhs into 10 into 9 by 12 divided by 5, which is 38,400 in this case, 37,400 in this case, and the total value being 2,87,400. In any case, it will be restricted to 2 lakhs under the optional regime. Are we all on the same page?
यस मैम।
Okay. अब हम निकालते हैं
मैम
डिफॉल्ट। हाँ बोलो।
मैम 187,500 आ रहा है।
187 कैसे आ रहा है? 25 लाख का 10% ही 2,50,000 है, तो फिर आपका 187 कैसे आ रहा है? आपने उसको 1 लाख
मैम 1/5 करने से पहले, 1/5 करने से पहले
1/5 करने से पहले अगर आप 25 लाख का 10% लेते हैं तो वो खुद ही तो 2.5 लाख है।
मैम उस पे 9/12 करके 187,500 आ रहा है।
अच्छा, आपने इस करंट ईयर में 9/12 क्यों किया है? थोड़ा सा एक्सप्लेन। आपने क्या देखा? 1 जुलाई को लोन लिया है इसलिए आपने ऐसा किया? आपने अप्रैल में जून छोड़ दिया? मतलब डिड यू डू दिस? आई एम जस्ट ट्राइंग टू अंडरस्टैंड हाउ यू कैलकुलेटेड।
मैम 1 जुलाई से किया है।
सो देखो, प्लीज बी केयरफुल अबाउट द टाइमलाइंस ऑल्सो ना। किस पीरियड का हो रहा है? व्हाट आर वी कैलकुलेटिंग? FY 23-24, राइट? इस टाइम पे मैक्सिमम आउटस्टैंडिंग बैलेंस ऑफ द लोन क्या था? अज्यूमिंग नो रीपेमेंट हैज बीन मेड ऑन प्रिंसिपल अकाउंट एंड इंटरेस्ट पे इंटरेस्ट तो हम लोग यूज भी नहीं करते, तो वी डोंट नीड दैट इंफॉर्मेशन। तो हम लोग क्या है प्रिंसिपल आउटस्टैंडिंग अमाउंट एज ऑन 1 अप्रैल 2023? बताओ। थैंक यू फॉर रेजिंग दिस, दीज आर लिटिल लिटिल थिंग्स। क्या होता है कॉन्सेप्चुअली तो हमें सब कुछ चलो पता भी हो जाए, पर प्रैक्टिकली जब हम करते हैं हम कुछ ना कुछ व्हाट वी कॉल एज सिली मिस्टेक्स कर ही देते हैं। दे आर वेरी ह्यूमन, यू नो, वी आर ऑल ह्यूमन बीइंग्स, वी टेंड टू डू ऑल दिस। सो आप जितना हाथ से प्रैक्टिस करेंगे यू विल ओवरकम दिस। दैट्स व्हाई आई इंसिस्ट कि डू नॉट सी 10 sums, rather do 3 sums, but do by hand. Okay. Why she did prorated? Because she felt कि जुलाई से लिया हुआ लोन है तो मैं 9 months का इंटरेस्ट लेती हूँ, पर उन्होंने ये चीज ओवरलुक कर लिया कि ये लोन जुलाई 2021 में लिया गया है एंड फॉर द ईयर 2023-24 ये पूरा अमाउंट, प्रिंसिपल अमाउंट एक्टिव था, आउटस्टैंडिंग था। 25 lakhs has to be into 10% for the entire year 23-24 and therefore no prorating is required. Okay, so from there you will get 2.5 lakhs. Now to calculate pre-construction interest, we need कि pre-construction period क्या था. So we will see how many months have gone into this loan of pre-construction. So आप 1 जुलाई 21 से लेके में आपने कहाँ तक कंस्ट्रक्शन बिगन कंप्लीटेड ऑन December 22, तो उतना आप पीरियड चेक करेंगे कि कितना हुआ, और 9/12 है क्योंकि 1 जुलाई से लिया गया है। ठीक है, तो प्री कंस्ट्रक्शन का इंटरेस्ट का वर्किंग अलग है, बट अदर देन दैट रेगुलर एनुअल इंटरेस्ट वो शुड बी ऑन द फुल अमाउंट ऑफ लोन बिकॉज यू हैव नॉट टेकन द लोन दिस ईयर, यू ऑलरेडी हैड इट ऑन 1 April ऑफ दिस ईयर। आर वी ऑन द सेम पेज? आई होप सो, बट मैंने फॉर योर रेफरेंस प्री कंस्ट्रक्शन इंटरेस्ट का भी डिटेल वर्किंग दिया है, ये है, आप देख लो। इफ यू आर नॉट एबल टू अंडरस्टैंड देन लेट मी नो. You keep your question on the portal, at the end we will see, but right now let us proceed. ठीक है, अच्छा, we come to the default regime. Default regime में self occupied property को कितना इंटरेस्ट मिलता है? Who can tell me? Default regime self occupied property, how much interest is allowable?
Interest not allowed, ma'am.
30,000, 2 lakhs, how much? Somebody
Not
said
allowed.
not allowable. Are we all correct? Do we acknowledge he's correct?
It is without ceiling limit.
Yes, he's correct. So default regime में दो डिफरेंसेस हो जाते हैं सेल्फ ऑक्यूपाइड प्रॉपर्टी को लेके। मतलब एक तो डिफरेंस सेल्फ ऑक्यूपाइड प्रॉपर्टी को लेके है कि इंटरेस्ट ऑन बोरोड कैपिटल भी नहीं मिलता। मतलब आपका जीएवी भी नहीं है, आपको स्टैंडर्ड डिडक्शन भी नहीं मिल रहा है, आपको इंटरेस्ट भी नहीं मिल रहा है, आपका मतलब सब कुछ ही नीली है, उसमें से कुछ नहीं निकलेगा डिफॉल्ट रेजिम में सेल्फ ऑक्यूपाइड प्रॉपर्टी से। ठीक है। और एक है कि ओवरऑल लॉस फ्रॉम हाउस प्रॉपर्टी अगर ऑप्शनल रजीम में आता है तो 2 लाख तक तो आप उसको दूसरे हेड से यूज कर सकते हैं, लेकिन अगर डिफॉल्ट रजीम में लॉस फ्रॉम हाउस प्रॉपर्टी आता है तो आप उसको वेस्ट कर सकते हैं, आप उसको कुछ नहीं कर सकते। ठीक है। सो लेट अस सी लेट आउट और सेल्फ ऑक्यूपाइड सब मिला के क्या है हमारा स्कोर। हमारा स्कोर है कि हमने डिफॉल्ट रजीम में वी हैव गॉट अ लॉस ऑफ 3,01,175 एंड इन द normal optional regime we have got a loss of 3,51,175. Okay, but in case of default regime nothing we could use against any other head, but in case of optional regime we could use up to 2 lakhs against our salary income. Okay, that we calculated above, and therefore we got a GTI after set off of 17.5 lakhs in default and 15.5 lakhs in normal regime. उसके बाद हम देंगे चैप्टर 6 का डिडक्शन 80EE जो हमने ऊपर में कैलकुलेट किया है। सो वी आर नॉट गिविंग एनीथिंग अंडर द डिफॉल्ट regime, you already know, but 1.5 lakhs is allowable and we assume it is the unexhausted limit and we have already reduced it from 24B calculation, so now at least you give it to him, and therefore we come to the total income which is further reduced in case of optional regime to 14 lakhs. In this case, if you are told by tell this person who has salary income and house property income, assume he has only these two sources of income, tell him which regime he should choose. So your answer will be, please go for optional regime because tax liability is lower under this regime in this year. Okay. Please shift out of default tax regime. So please conclude with the answer. If the question is compute liability under both regimes, then you do this and you leave it. Fine, finished. But if the question is, please suggest which regime is better, which regime should be chosen, then please answer that line also, that this is more beneficial, this should be chosen, he should shift out of this, choose this, whatever it is. Please mention that also to complete the answer. All right, we are at 4:51 and I hope this is clear, so we can move on to the next question. Okay. Mrs. Ridhima, a resident individual aged 62 years, is a qualified medical practitioner. She runs her own clinic. She is working part-time with Sanjeevani Hospitals and her salary details are as follows. Further, during this previous year, her son had undergone a medical treatment in Sanjeevani Hospitals free of cost. Okay, that means medical treatment has been provided by the employer's own hospital. What do you think it is? What implication is it to be getting a treatment at your own employer's hospital?
Exempt.
So they have tried to confuse you by telling you that hospital would have charged 1,60,000 for a similar treatment to unrelated patients. Trying to tell you that the value of benefit you have got is actually 1,60,000 because you didn't have to pay. Anybody else would have come, would have had to pay. Okay. But this is a categorically exempt perquisite because the hospital is owned and managed by the employer. Therefore, this will be exempt in this case of Ridhima. Okay. So this is income from salaries. Next we come to income from house property. She owns a residential house. Reconstruction was started on 1st April, completed on 30th September. After reconstruction, ground floor is self-occupied by her. First floor has been rented out since 1st October. So middle of the year, okay? Whatever calculations you do, please prorate it. Okay. Both the floors are of equal area. What indication does it make? That when you are prorating, make it 50-50. The monthly rent is 40,000. Tenant also pays 3,000 as power backup charges. So it's a case of composite rent where you have details of rental income and you also have details of other income which the tenant pays. Okay, but you are separately, you can see that. Okay. She took a housing loan of 25 lakhs for reconstruction on 1st April 23. So the loan that she has taken is on 1st April 23. Anyway, 80EE ka period crossed hai. Don't need to check. Interest on housing loan for the period 1st April 23 to 30th June 23 was 1,20,000 and for the period 1st October to 31st March was 1 lakh. Okay. Matlab interest was revised during that period or perhaps the principal balance went down. We don't know. During the year, she also paid municipal taxes for the financial year 22-23 and for financial year 23-24. अच्छा, इसने arrears of municipal tax भी pay किया है. She has cleared her municipal tax liability of 2 years in 1 year only by paying together. What implication does it make? She is the owner and municipal tax is allowed on payment basis. So even if she is paying for 2 years together, we will take the 2 years amount only now because this is a payment basis or cash basis item. Okay. Other information from her PL account, conveyance expenses include a sum of 48,000 incurred from conveyance from house to Sanjeevani hospitals and vice versa. So this is basically conveyance from home to office, office to home. This conveyance expense. Power and fuel expense of 10,000 for generator fuel for providing backup power backup to tenants. So these are expenses incurred on the house property. Are these relevant? Administrative expenses paid as municipal taxes include a sum of 10,000 paid as municipal taxes for her house. Okay, so you have seen 10,000 or 5,000 upar mein. So that is the 10,000 they are talking about. But overall administrative expenses includes this as paid as municipal tax. But is administrative expense relevant for us? There may be power and fuel expense, there may be administrative expense in her PL account, but because there is a concept of standard deduction under income from house property, we do not care about actual expenses made by the landlord. Are we all on the same page? So we don't care what expenses this person made. Okay. You are required to compute total income of Ridhima, assuming she has opted out of 115 BSE. So we are going under the optional regime here. Okay, only one regime, optional regime. Okay. Okay, so I hope everybody has read. Let us first start with calculating income from salaries. Put down basic pay, transport, and see what you get. What's this? So basic pay, transport, these are all taxable expenses even under optional regime. This is under optional regime. Under optional regime. We should write down because we also get confused. There are so many facts in the sum that, let out, self-occupied, optional, default, these things we should write down so that we don't have to think or check the sum again and again. Okay. So income from salaries में basic pay तो आपको लेना ही है. Transport allowance is also fully taxable because actual conveyance expense from home to office, office to home doesn't matter. तो आपको जो भी allowance मिल रहा है, whether or not you have spent it or saved out of it, it is completely taxable. Okay, under both regimes, even under optional, it is taxable. And it would have been perhaps exempt for special employees, right? For physically challenged, have done this. There was a specific category, if you remember, but this is not that case. So here we are going to fully tax it. Okay. Cost of treatment for son, we all discussed that because it is hospital maintained by own employer, so it is a completely exempt perquisite and we are not going to tax it. So what is the gross salary? Easy to calculate. Gross salary is this much. Standard deduction, we should give under both regimes. We know that 50,000 is the limit, so let's just give it. And income from salaries is this. Achha, somebody, can you tell me, suppose the gross salary was 30,000 for any kind of reason. Okay, then what standard deduction would you have given?
30,000.
30,000.
30,000.
30 or 50, I mean actual or 30, whichever is, or 50,000, whichever is lower. Okay, you cannot be a situation like in income from house property, you give so much of deduction that you come to a situation when you have a loss. But there cannot be a situation that you have loss from salary head. Okay, you can have a loss from house property, you can have from capital gains, you can have loss from even other sources, or you can have loss from business profession, obviously you can have, but you cannot have loss from salaries. Now we've calculated this, just park it aside. Let's come to income from house property. So there are first floor, second floor, treat them as two houses. Okay, wherever you have, part of the house, let out, part of the house self-occupied, treat them as two houses. In this case, they are equal in area, they have given you. So you assume whatever you do, you prorate. It is equal, half of that you will. Okay. Now, gross annual value. Gross annual value ke liye we need expected rent, we need actual rent. Okay, so the let out portion, that is the first floor. So let us see if we have details. Monthly rent. So we have actual rent. That means 40,000 into 12. We have the actual rent. And do we have the other values? Do we have municipal value, fair rent, standard rent? We have nothing. If you don't have information, then do not calculate expected rent. Just calculate actual rent and proceed. Okay. So 40,000 per month. Achha, somebody please tell me. Tenant has paid 3,000 per month as power backup charges. You have also incurred 10,000 perhaps annually for power backup charges. So basically landlord spent on say the generator and recovered that from the tenant. Okay. For you as the landlord, you are getting standard deduction. What you spend does not matter. So we ignore it. Fine. But for the tenant who is paying you 3,000 per month for power backup, what will you do? How does it affect the income from house property calculation?
So that power backup charges, we have to 10,000 minus 3,000, 7,000 we have to take, but that is to be taken in income from other sources.
So you are right in saying that it is not income from house property, because we spoke that in cases of composite rent where they are separable, where you can see there are two
Yes,
items.
yes.
Then property part you take as house property, and the other service part or incidental things you please take it as income from other sources.
Yes,
And
yes,
if
yes.
she is into, she's a medical practitioner, if her business was letting out house property, we would have perhaps taken it into PGBP also. But so you're right that it's not relevant for IFHP calculation, and you need to perhaps see it under IFOS calculation. But you are receiving 3,000 per month and you are spending 10,000 per annum. So you be careful about that when you're calculating. Okay. Right. Anyway, it is not relevant from house property perspective. So at least here we are going to ignore it. And because we know that this property was let out on 1st October, somewhere I saw 1st October. Yes, 1st October. So we will only take 6 months, right? Chalo, we have calculated. Now we need to reduce municipal taxes, and they have said that it is 10,000 in this year. We will take the, ideally full 10,000 is eligible because it has been paid by the owner during this year. But that 10,000 relates to both the parts, let out as well as self-occupied. So we will see to the extent of the let out part, how much does it derive. So the let out part deserves half of it. So 10,000 by 2, 5,000 is what is claimable here. Okay, when you see this 5,000, don't get mistaken that, oh, we have only considered the value which pertains to FY 23-24. We have ignored FY 22-23. That's not the reason, because payment basis is allowable even if you pay for 10 years together. Okay, but we have done a prorating only for the reason that part of the property is let out and part of the property is self-occupied. So for that reason, we have made a half of it. And incidentally, the amount is also 5,000, but don't get confused. Okay. Net annual value is the net of it. Then we come to deductions. It is a let out property, so we get standard deduction at 30%. We will give that of net value, net annual value, and then we have an interest on housing loan deduction. So it is a let out portion, and this is an optional regime. So what do you think should be the interest deductible? Housing loan is 25 lakhs, reconstruction reasons, and interest is 1,20,000 plus 1 lakh, matlab 2,20,000. What is deductible? 2,20,000 interest has been incurred for reconstruction, and this is a let out property. What should be the limit? 30,000, don't you think so?
No limit, ma'am.
Why? We had studied na ki for repair, reconstruction, renewal, the limit is 30,000.
Self-occupied.
It is not for let out property.
Right. We studied that for self-occupied. For let out, it does not matter, right? चलो ठीक है. So जो भी है सब ले लो और reduce करके निकालो. अभी ये तो पूरे हाउस का था. We have to obviously prorate it for the let out portion. हाँ, तो only for the first floor, half of it relates to the first floor. We will reduce accordingly and we will calculate the GAV. How many of you have got the NAV at 54,500? Okay, I hope you have got it because it has been a fairly easy calculation so far. Let us now come to self-occupied portion ground floor. Acha, for if any of you have missed a step somewhere and you're completely lost, please ignore that. Move on with us. Okay. And that step, you keep it in your notes as highlighted. When I upload these answers to the portal, please cross-check from there. Do not get blocked because you lost something somewhere. Okay. All right. Self-occupied portion, which is the ground floor. What do you think should be the gross annual value? Very quickly.
Nil.
Nil.
Now, deductions under section 24, interest on housing loan for reconstruction. So, what should be the interest deductible for reconstruction on self-occupied property under optional regime? Sure. I've given you so many facts. Amount of interest is 1,10,000 for the self-occupied portion. It is the loan was taken for reconstruction, and it is the optional regime. Now, you tell me how much is deductible. Come on.
मैम रिकंस्ट्रक्शन इज मतलब रिपेयर हो रहा है.
Yes. In fact, incidentally, I
30,000.
happened to give a hint also a few seconds back. That repair, renewal, reconstruction, they fall in one bracket. And for self-occupied, that is 30,000. Okay. So you will restrict it to 30,000. Now income from house property, if we take both the units together, the net income is 24,500. In either regimes, optional or default, set off within the head of income from house property is allowed. Let out or self-occupied ka apas ka set off is allowed. The only problem in default regime is the net loss from income from house property head cannot be set off against any other head. That is their problem. Okay. Acha, income from other sources. Somebody very well said that we need to take it to other sources. So I will respect that. I will not forget it. 3,000 per month for 6 months because it started from 1st October. Okay. Now you will say, वो तो फर्क तो लिखा ही नहीं है. But अगर आपने रेंट पे 1st October से दिया है तो पावर बैकअप तो 1st April से नहीं देंगे. तो that is also implied that वो भी 1st October से ही आ रहा है. And 6 months is what you need to calculate. Okay. कहीं पे you have to apply your common sense also as to how logically or practically a transaction can work out. Okay. So 18,000 is what we got, 10,000 is what we incurred. And remember, income from other sources, deductions are generally allowable on mercantile basis. So 10,000 you will take, net is 8,000. You've added all of these heads, salary, house property, other sources, and you've got this total income under optional regime.
Madam, this 10,000 deduction. Madam, this 10,000 deduction is allowable in default tax regime also.
Because income from other sources can be calculated in similar way in both the regimes.
Okay.
Okay. See, there is a difference between an incentive and a normal deduction. If you make expenses, then even default regime recognizes it. It allows you. What they are trying to discourage under the default regime is exemptions, incentives, unnecessary benefits over and above what you have incurred. Okay. Because they are trying to curtail.
Just to get a confirmation from you after, madam. I'm
no,
having doubt. I'm having doubt, so to get confirmation, I ask.
No, I do not mind your asking this. In fact, good. If you ask a question, so many else have also got benefited from this. Okay. But I'm just trying to explain the reasoning behind the default regime so that you understand where you need to apply, where you don't need to apply, even if you forget it. Okay. Some places you need to guess also, na? Everything we don't remember in the exam hall. So you should have some logic to help you guess. That's what my idea was.
Thank you.
All right. This was a good sum. If I have to summarize this, I would say as composite rent, we dealt with this concept here. We dealt with the optional regime and any other, I think only composite rent was the new thing. Otherwise, it was regular only. Nothing as such. Okay. Okay. Question number 4. Now we are at 508. So now we have either we can move ahead with house property or we can move ahead with salaries. Tell me what to do.
मैम एमसीक्यू करवा दो जो रह गया था।
ठीक है, तो मैं ऐसा करती हूँ कि क्वेश्चन नंबर 4, 5 जो हाउस प्रॉपर्टी का है वो मैं आपको होमवर्क में दे दूंगी, ठीक है। और अभी हम दो चीजें करेंगे। एक है क्विक असेसमेंट ऑफ हाउस प्रॉपर्टी, इसमें भी कुछ एमसीक्यूज आपसे पूछेंगे टू असेस आपको आज कितना समझ में आया। एंड वी विल डू क्वेश्चन नंबर 7, 1 and 2 ऑफ सैलरीज, दैट इज ऑल्सो एन एमसीक्यू फॉर्मेट टू रिवाइज द सैलरीज थिंग।
Yeah, in the portal, all these questions were uploaded. Whether we will get solutions also in the portal?
Yes, in fact, I have already uploaded solutions of salaries. Okay.
Okay. Thank
And in short time, I will also upload salaries, house property solutions. But I want you to solve without seeing the solutions first, and then compare only for reference.
Only for comparing, I must.
Yes, yes. Because if you apply your mind yourself, you will realize where little वो जो 1,87,500 हुआ, बहुत ही किसी ने खुद से किया है तभी हुआ है। कोई देखेगा तो उसको स्ट्राइक भी नहीं करेगा कि this kind of error can happen. Right?
Because you have to know whether you have done correct or not. That's
Right.
purpose I must.
हाँ, नहीं, definitely, I understand that, and all the solutions will be uploaded. Don't worry about that. Okay. So home practice questions are there. They will have answers also. So just see them. You will be able to understand. Try to apply your mind and then see them. For now, we will solve this question and this question. We have two questions for your assessment, and let's do only one of them now. And if we get time, we'll do the other, and then we'll do the question from salaries income. Okay, even today, are you okay to push this class by another 15-20 minutes? Do I have your consensus?
Yes.
Okay, then fine. Let's try to do both these sums and one from salaries. Okay. Please read this question number 6, page number 19 of your deck. Mr. Arbaz is a co-owner of a house property. So what is new about this sum? We are dealing with co-ownership. That is, we are dealing with section 26. Okay. I'm trying to give hints that what new will you find in this sum, so that when you revise, you get a flavor of each type. Mr. Arbaz is a co-owner of a house property along with his brother Salman, holding equal share in the property named above. So municipal value of the property, fair rent, standard rent, fair rent received, all the details are given to you. Loan for property construction is jointly taken and interest charged by bank is 25,000, out of which 21,000 has been paid. How much of interest on loan has been actually paid? Is it any kind of relevant information?
No, ma'am. Interest is on accrual basis.
Perfect. Okay. Interest on unpaid interest is 450. Is it any kind of relevant information?
No, ma'am.
We should ignore it.
Correct. Please write that it is not deductible. Okay. To repay the loan, Arbaz and Salman took a fresh loan and interest charged thereon is 5,000. This is deductible. Interest taken on loan to repay original loan is okay. But interest on unpaid interest is not okay. Municipal taxes of 5,100 was paid by tenant. How much is deductible?
Nil.
It's nil, because tenant
Not
is paying.
deducted.
We don't care.
Yes.
Owner has to pay, na? Either of the owners
Yes,
has
ma'am.
to pay. None of them have paid. So then we cannot allow anything. Okay. Let us calculate. These are MCQs. Okay, I'm throwing random questions at you. It's like a fastest fingers first. So please apply your finger first, unmute yourself and answer. What should be the expected rent? Numbers are in front of you.
160.
160,000.
1,60,000.
160.
Fair rent is 1,50,000. Standard rent is 160. So 160 or 150, whichever is higher, 160. Subject to 170. So what is the final outcome? 160. Okay, let us see the answer. And remember, this is co-ownership. Okay, this is co-ownership. But so question number 6, answer number 1, expected rent. Answer is 1,60,000, because here in the question, I didn't say what is the expected rent in the hands of Mr. Arbaz. If I had said, then that would have been perhaps a different thing, right? Because it is co-ownership, holding equal share, then we would, how do you compute if it is a co-owned property, co-owned let out property? You apportion the income. between the co-owners, right? Based on the ratio of their ownership, right? So if this question was in the hands of Arbaz, I would have perhaps done a 50%. But because it is just a general question, what is the expected rent? So I'm calculating for the whole property and I'm not prorating it. Okay. All right. What should be the GAV?
1,60,000.
1,80,000.
What is the actual rent?
Sorry,
What is the actual rent?
1,80,000.
Actual rent is
Higher than-
1,80,000. So GAV is higher of no case of vacancy. So don't have to apply too much of head. Just do higher of these two, which is 1,80,000. Okay, so you've got the second answer also. What should be the NAV?
1,80,000.
1,80,000.
Municipal taxes paid by the tenant are not deductible. So NAV is also 1,80,000. Superb answering. Okay. What should be the interest deductible under section 24? But they have
26,000.
not asked for total deduction. Do not give me 24A plus 24B. Just give me 24B because they have asked for interest.
30%.
26,000.
26,000 when you are saying, how do you say so? You are saying 21,000 plus 5,000. Have you taken that?
No, ma'am, 30,000.
We discussed in the very beginning. I warned you. Okay. That payment is not relevant in case of interest. Take the accrual, right? So somebody is saying 30,000. And I hope there is no limit on let out property. And we cannot take 450 interest on unpaid interest. So 30,000 is the right answer. What is the income from house property taxable in Arbaz's hands?
48,000.
48,000.
So
That
after
54,000 we have to put, madam. That 30% was not included there. We have to kept 54,000. Then we have to, it will come 138. 180 minus 138.
correct. That means what he's trying to say is that question number D was only on this row. Doesn't mean you will not give 30% standard deduction. You have to separately calculate it. Then you give both the deductions. Then you calculate 50% thereof. Somebody already arrived at 48,000 and that is bingo, the correct answer. Okay, very good. I'm so happy. So we have time to do another sum. Let's quickly do another fastest fingers first. Question in front of you on your screen. Mrs. Madhuri, a US citizen, is a ROR in India during FY 23-24. She owns a property at LA, USA, which is used as a residence. Annual value is $20,000. USD to INR is 75 rupees per dollar. Okay, so there is a resident US citizen, but resident for tax purposes in India. And property is at LA in USA. Does it make any kind of relevance to us or it doesn't?
It will be taxable to us. As she's
Taxable
ROR.
or not, taxable or not is a separate thing. But the point is that yes, it forms a part of the scope of consideration because this person is a resident in India. So even if property is situated outside India, we need to at least take into consideration. Now, this is a self-occupied property. So let's park it. Let's read other facts and then let's see. But the whole point is we are not outruling it. We are considering it. That is what we need to decide now. Okay. Next, she took ownership and possession of a flat in a complex called Ghagra in Agra on 1st July, which is self-occupied, while she is in India. So, okay. So 1st July, she came to India. Again, she took a flat and on 1st July. Okay. And self-occupied it. Fine. The flat was used by her for 7 months only because 1st July, if she came, so July, August, September, October, November, December, January, February, March. That means in that period, 9 months also, she did not use it completely. Okay. So the flat was used by her for 7 months only. All right. Municipal value is this much, fair rent is this much. She paid the following to the Corporation of Agra. When they say Corporation of Agra, what corporation are they talking about?
Municipal corporation.
Not life insurance corporation. They're talking about municipal corporation. And what is relevant here is like municipal taxes and all those things. So property tax 16,200, sewage tax 1,800. Okay. She had taken a loan from Standard Chartered Bank in June 2021 for purchasing this flat. And June 2021. Okay. So वैसे देखो तो it falls in that 80 AA period. Let's see if we have those stamp duty values, this and that in our thing. Otherwise, we will not consider this. Okay. Otherwise, we will not think about 80 AA. All right. Okay. Interest on loan is as under. But anyway, if she has taken a loan in June 21, then she already has a property in LA. So anyway, she's not eligible. 80 AA out rule. Okay. I am thinking aloud. This is how you will think aloud in the exams. Okay. All right. I mean, don't think aloud over there. Don't go and talk over there. But I'm just giving you a reference. Interest on loan is as under. Prior to 1st April 2023, 49,200. April to June, 50,800. 1st July to 31st March, this much. Acha, so there is a prior to the period also. Can you get a sense of pre-construction interest that they are talking about? So this sum will also help you to do pre-construction interest. Okay. And one more sum that we did was very good on pre-construction interest. I think question number 2 we did now. I'll just refer. Question number 2 we did or 3 we did for pre-construction? I think we did 2. So
Question 2, ma'am.
2, na?
ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
There was a very good element of pre-construction interest over there. Please solve that sum. Very good sum. It's a complete what do you say? Paisa vasool sum. If you solve it, you get so many things exposure. Okay, sorry for digressing. Let's come back. So there is a pre-construction interest. Let's see what to do with it. Because property, she had taken a loan in June 21 and now in July 23, you already are taking ownership of it, which means it is complete within 5 years. And this is the year in which you have first started to use it. So this is the year of construction completion also. And from now you will start to take 1/5 of pre-construction interest, right? So yes, all of these things matter to us. She had a house property in Bareilly sold in March 2020. Oh God, apart from LA, she had another house. No question of 80 AA. In respect of which she received arrears of rent of 60,000 in March 2024. But okay, fine. As on March 2020, she had sold it. And now why they are talking about it is because now she has received arrears of rent. So this is also talking about 25A adjustment. So this is a good sum. Okay. Arrears of rent. What happens if someday, you get your old recoveries back? Okay. And it was not taxed earlier. Matlab, it was unrealized rent earlier. Perhaps you must have got a deduction. So now you will do whatever. Okay. Compute the following. Yes, please, everybody, be very quick. Note down all the relevant facts on your paper and calculator and tell me these. What is the income from LA house taxable in India under either regime? If they are asking you either regime, so at the very beginning, you make 2 big columns. Under that, you make 3 sub inner columns. Okay, so 3 plus 3 total 6 columns and under 2 banners. 1 default regime, 1 optional regime. Okay. What is the income from LA house? Annual value is $20,000. Assume that is the gross annual value. Okay. Don't have to, if you don't have any details about DR, AR, then take what they've given you. Assume this is the GAV. Okay. And conversion rate has also been given to you. So your numbers have to be in INR for India purpose. So just apply 75 and tell me what should be the income from LA house taxable under either regime. And please remember, it's a self-occupied house.
Ma'am, it's self-occupied.
Yes, it's self-occupied.
तो इनकम इसमें arise
No
हो ही नहीं
income.
रहा।
Dekha? Why I like these kind of sums? They give us so much of information that we tend to think we'll have to use it. Baba, we have got $20,000 and we have got an exchange rate. We definitely have to use it. You know? But what do we do with all that if it is self-occupied? We don't need it. Absolutely correct. The answer is 0 under either regime. Very good. Next. Interest deductible under section 24. Only interest, huh? I don't need standard deduction. Don't give me the entire deduction. Just give me 224B. Under either regime. Let me help you.
It's ma'am 1,91,940.
अच्छा, तो
1,91,940
प्रॉपर्टी में तो कोई लोन ही नहीं है, तो कोई प्रॉब्लम ही नहीं है. लेट्स मूव टू द घाघरा आगरा प्रॉपर्टी. उसमें क्या हुआ है, देयर इज लोन टेकन इन जून 21. उसका प्रायर प्री कंस्ट्रक्शन इंटरेस्ट उन्होंने दे ही दिया आपको, तो उसका 1/5 आप लेंगे. ड्यूरिंग द ईयर का इंटरेस्ट 50,800 प्लस 1,31,300 आप वो पूरा लेंगे. देखो क्या होता है दोनों रेजिम में, क्या होता है. एनुअल वैल्यू तो कुछ नहीं है, आपको इंटरेस्ट लेना है. तो इसमें आप करंट ईयर में तो दोनों में ही आप मतलब करंट में पहले तो कैलकुलेट करेंगे इंटरेस्ट, तो वो दोनों को मिला के आएगा. 1/5 ऑफ प्री कंस्ट्रक्शन इंटरेस्ट आपने लिया. डिफॉल्ट रेजिम में ऐसे भी कुछ नहीं मिलना है, वैसे भी कुछ नहीं मिलना है. अब आपको खाली ऑप्शनल रेजिम निकालना है, उसमें आपको इतना मिल रहा है. अब ऑप्शनल रेजिम में भी कैप तो 2 लाख का है वैसे, पर ये 2 लाख के अंदर ही है, तब कोई बात ही नहीं है. तब हमें एक्चुअली इनकम फ्रॉम हाउस प्रॉपर्टी एट आगरा क्या आ रहा है, इतना ही आ रहा है. वी आर अलाउइंग द फुल थिंग बिकॉज इट इज विद इन 2 lakhs. आर वी ऑल ऑन द सेम पेज? And in the default regime, we are giving nothing. Okay, just so that you don't get confused, let me highlight the headings. Okay, first wala CDE, they are default, and then last wala are the optional regime. Okay, I hope we are all on the same page as far as Agra ka Ghagra is concerned. All right. Let's move on to Bareilly ki Barfi. So there is a house property in Bareilly sold in March 2020 और arrears मिला है अभी. तो हमको क्या करना है, 25A का adjustment माने we need to take the rent received. This will be on cash basis because it's an exception to the rule. Cash basis पे आपको जो मिला आप ले लो and you give 30% deduction, but that is not 24B deduction, that is 25 capital A deduction. Okay, और उसके बाद आपको निकालना है कि उसका क्या net taxable arrears है for the Bareilly property. Please give your answers.
42,000.
42,000.
Okay, lot of people are saying 42,000. Let me see कैसे निकाला आपने. 42,000 दोनों रेजाइम में होना चाहिए क्योंकि कोई डिफरेंस तो है ही नहीं, दोनों रेजाइम में एक जैसा ही होना चाहिए. चलो ठीक है. उसके बाद हम आते हैं अपने नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन में. व्हाट शुड बी द इनकम फ्रॉम हाउस प्रॉपर्टी अंडर ओल्ड रेजाइम एंड व्हाट शुड बी द इनकम फ्रॉम हाउस प्रॉपर्टी अंडर द डिफॉल्ट रेजाइम. ओल्ड मैंने ऑप्शनल ना, हम पुराने जमाने के हैं ना, हमने पहले वो देखा है इसलिए हम उसको ओल्ड बोलते हैं. आपके लिए वो ऑप्शनल है. ठीक है, तो ऑप्शनल रेजाइम में क्या है और डिफॉल्ट रेजाइम में क्या है, आपको टोटल निकालना है. आगरा का घाघरा, एलए वेले सब ये तो एलए तो आया ही नहीं ना, एलए तो आया ही नहीं. तो और बरेली की बर्फी सब मिला के हमें मिला है ये. सो दीज आर द आंसर्स. ओके, ऑल राइट. चलो, we have 15 more minutes because we agreed to push the class by another 15 minutes, and in these 15 minutes as agreed I will solve this thing, salaries का question. ठीक है. Did you like the house property discussion?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. अच्छा, I will also take a second to just check कि किसी ने पोर्टल में कुछ क्वेश्चन डाला है क्या. I have been told कि आपको पोर्टल दिखाना नहीं है मुझे, इसलिए मैंने स्क्रीन शेयरिंग ऑफ किया है.
Ma'am,
Yes.
ma'am, once can you please discuss about prorating of municipal tax? I have little bit doubt in that.
Prorating of municipal tax. Okay. So prorating of municipal tax में हमने ये डिस्कस किया था कि अगर आपका केस है कि पार्ट ऑफ द ईयर इट वाज सेल्फ ऑक्यूपाइड प्रॉपर्टी एंड पार्ट ऑफ द ईयर इट वाज लेट आउट, मतलब पीरियड में प्रॉब्लम है पर प्रॉपर्टी मतलब प्रॉपर्टी पूरा ही है, पीरियड इज प्रोरेटेड, लेट आउट और सेल्फ ऑक्यूपाइड, तब आपको कितना डिडक्शन लेना है. तो उसमें मैंने बोला था म्यूनिसिपल टैक्स आपको पूरे ईयर का डिडक्शन लेना है because municipal tax claim is linked to property and not linked to period. You will not prorate it based on period for which it was let out. You will claim the full thing if to the extent of the property unit. Okay, but if part of the property is only self occupied and part of the property is let out, तब आप म्यूनिसिपल टैक्स को प्रोरेट करेंगे. मेरे बोलने का मतलब है कि पीरियड के वजह से आप प्रोरेट नहीं करेंगे, प्रॉपर्टी के एरिया के वजह से अगर लेट आउट सेल्फ ऑक्यूपाइड में डिफरेंस है तो आप प्रॉपर्टी के हिसाब से प्रोरेट करेंगे। डिड यू गेट माई पॉइंट?
Okay, ma'am.
अंडरस्टूड ना? मतलब क्वेश्चन में अगर पार्ट ऑफ द पीरियड लेट आउट, पार्ट ऑफ द पीरियड सेल्फ ऑक्यूपाइड, इट डजंट मैटर टू यू, पूरी प्रॉपर्टी का म्युनिसिपल टैक्स आप क्लेम कर लेंगे अगेन इन द लेट आउट पोर्शन। ठीक है। और अगर आपका क्वेश्चन में है कि प्रॉपर्टी का ही पार्ट लेट आउट है और पार्ट सेल्फ ऑक्यूपाइड है, जैसे आपके बहुत सारे क्वेश्चंस में आया था ये, तब आप उसको रिस्पेक्टिव एरियाज के हिसाब से प्रोरेट करेंगे म्युनिसिपल टैक्स। ठीक है। All right. Now let me see, there are some questions on the portal now. Ma'am, please help to solve salary question of September 24. अच्छा, किसी ने मुझे लास्ट क्लास September 24 के नाम पे पूछा था कि क्या एक आपकी क्वेरी थी, क्या आपने
रेंट फ्री अकोमोडेशन,
अरियर? हाँ,
रेंट फ्री अकोमोडेशन की थी मैम।
रेंट फ्री अकोमोडेशन इफ द अकोमोडेशन स्ट्रेचेस टू मोर देन 1 फाइनेंशियल ईयर, तो इंडेक्सेशन कैसे करना है किसी ने पूछा था, करेक्ट?
यस मैम।
आपने कहाँ देख लिया? आई डोंट नो, बिकॉज the provision says that the first previous year for that purpose is the previous year 23-24 which is the subject year for you. ठीक है, मतलब subsequent year कम से कम 24-20 assessment financial year 24-25 होगा, जो आपके सिलेबस में नहीं है अभी, राइट? तो इंडेक्सेशन का एप्लीकेशन तो आप नेक्स्ट ईयर जाके देखेंगे, आपके कोई क्वेश्चन में वो आ ही नहीं सकता। ओके, तो आपने बोला आपने ऐसा क्वेश्चन देखा है, तो मैंने भी फिर इंस्टीट्यूट से क्रॉस चेक किया, बोर्ड ऑफ स्टडीज से, हमारे नॉलेज में ऐसा कोई क्वेश्चन नहीं है, बट अगर आपने कहीं देख लिया है तो यू हैव बीन आस्क्ड टू ईमेल इट टू dt.inter@ici.in if you have that email ID. Do you have it?
नो मैम।
So if you don't have it, तो मैं चैट बॉक्स पे एक ईमेल आईडी दूंगी जिसपे आपको वो डालना है। ओके, आप अपने क्वेरीज, अगर आपको क्वेश्चन में कहीं भी कोई पब्लिकेशन में कुछ ऐसा दिखे जो आपको समझ में नहीं आ रहा है, तो आपको एक ईमेल आईडी में इंस्टीट्यूट के बोर्ड ऑफ स्टडीज को मेल करना है। ओके, जो मैं आपको बता देती हूँ वो ईमेल आईडी चैट बॉक्स में कि वो क्या है, आप उसको नोट करके रखें।
Ma'am, the chat box are disabled.
हाँ, आपके लिए डिसेबल्ड है, पर मेरी तरफ से कुछ जाएगा तो आपको दिखेगा। हैव यू गॉट इट?
Okay.
अगर आपको नहीं दिखा है तो मैं अब जब सोल्यूशंस आपको सैलरीज का दिखाऊंगी वहां पे आप स्क्रीन से देख लेना, वहां पे भी मैं लिख रही हूँ।
आ गया।
No, दिख रहा है।
हाँ, ठीक है। तो सीए पब्लिकेशन में कोई भी प्रॉब्लम हो आप इस ईमेल आईडी पे रीच आउट करें। वैसे आपने जो बोला मैंने भी क्रॉस चेक किया, मुझे वो नहीं मिला। ओके, अच्छा, उसके बाद आपके लास्ट टाइम क्वेरी थी कि प्लीज डिफॉल्ट और न्यू रेजिम के बीच में जो कंपैरिजन है उसका एक एक्रोनिम दो, क्या हाउ वी रिमेम्बर इट इजीली, तो वो मैंने इंक्लूड कर दिया है, मैंने आपको बताया, आप जाकर उसको देखना एंड ट्राई टू रिमेम्बर द डिफरेंसेस। अच्छा, उसके अलावा आपके पोर्टल में क्या क्या क्वेरीज हैं मैम? प्री कंस्ट्रक्शन पीरियड इंटरेस्ट, मतलब प्री कंस्ट्रक्शन पीरियड इंटरेस्ट मतलब आपने लोन तो ले लिया पर प्रॉपर्टी खत्म नहीं हुआ, प्रॉपर्टी इज नॉट येट रेडी। Okay, so the period of interest on the loan taken from the date of loan till the previous year in which the property construction is complete. This is pre-construction period. Okay, I hope it makes sense to you. Okay, उसके बाद आता है मैम वी आर अनेबल टू अनम्यूट आवरसेल्व्स। ठीक है, चैट इज डिसेबल्ड। ठीक है, ठीक है। Pre-construction allowed in current year is 37,500. I think that is what we saw also. But आपका जो 187,500 था वो क्यों गलत था, वो हमने क्लास में डिस्कस किया कोमलप्रीत, कि आपने करंट ईयर में ही प्रोरेट कर दिया था जो नहीं होना चाहिए था। ओके, ठीक है। सो आई हैव सीन ऑल योर क्वेरीज ऑन द पोर्टल, देयर इज नथिंग मोर एंड वी कैन नाउ प्रोसीड विद सैलरीज। चलो ठीक है, सैलरीज का क्वेश्चन नंबर 7.1 एंड 7.2 ऑन पब्लिक डिमांड वी विल सॉल्व दैट। तो आप लोग प्लीज अपने अपने पोर्टल से अपडेटेड डेक को डाउनलोड करें और उसमें आप आए पेज नंबर 35 पे, जिसमें आपको 2 केस स्टडीज मिलेंगे, क्वेश्चन नंबर 7.1 एंड 7.2, मिस्टर सैफ एंड मिसेस करीना। ओके, आप उधर आ जाए एंड देन वी विल टुगेदर सॉल्व द सम्स। लेट मी नो व्हेन यू आर रेडी। We will solve Mr. Saif first. So if you are there, please start reading Mr. Saif. अगर आपके पास पुराना डेक भी है तो भी ये क्वेश्चन वहां पे भी था, नो प्रॉब्लम, प्लीज डोंट पैनिक। सैफ को फाइंड करें और वहीं पे आप अटक जाएं। Okay. Mr. Saif completed his MBA in April 2023 and joined Rates Limited from 1st May 2023. बेसिक सैलरी दिया हुआ है 12% ऑफ बेसिक सैलरी एज डीए फॉर्मिंग पार्ट, ठीक है। Contributed 11% of his pay and DA towards RPF and company contributes same amount. Okay. Accumulated interest on provident fund is this much as on the last day of the year. Accumulated interest. What would be the income chargeable to tax under salaries if he opts out of 115 BAC? That means optional regime. अगर वो optional regime में जाते हैं तो क्या होता है? देखो बाकी सब तो अच्छा ही है, प्रॉब्लम कहाँ लग रहा है कि कहीं तो इन लोग के इंटरेस्ट को लेके कुछ आएगा। बिकॉज बाकी तो नॉर्मल है ना, बेसिक सैलरी है, डीए फॉर्मिंग पार्ट है और एक आरपीएफ में कंट्रीब्यूशन है, वो भी 12% के अंदर है, तो हमें तो कोई प्राइम ऑफेसी टैक्सेबल अमाउंट नहीं निकल रहा है। लेकिन बीच बीच में 17-7 और 17-7A को आप ध्यान करें और अमाउंट को क्वांटिफाई भी करके देखें कि ये 11% होता कितना है, देन वी विल सी परहैप्स कुछ एडजस्टमेंट चाहिए क्या। ठीक है, सो लेट अस स्टार्ट द सोल्यूशन। आपको सबको स्क्रीन दिख रहा है, राइट? आई एम अज्यूमिंग राइट। ओके
यस मैम।
ओके, तो आपने बेसिक सैलरी प्लॉट कर लिया, डीए फॉर्मिंग पार्ट प्लॉट कर लिया, टोटल निकाल लिया। अब आपने इनर कॉलम में लिखा कि एम्प्लॉयर का और एम्प्लॉय का जो कि इक्वल कंट्रीब्यूशन है वो कितना है। ओके, तो वैसे तो आप देखेंगे कि 11% ही है रिलेटिव टर्म्स में, परसेंटेज वाइज जो 12% ऑफ बेसिक अलाउड है, आपको 11% ऑफ बेसिक एंड डीए है। सो वैसे आप देखें तो बेसिक एंड डीए फॉर्मिंग पार्ट मतलब आरपीएफ के लिए, यू रिमेम्बर हमने सैलरी के मीनिंग का 3 बकेट्स किया था। आरपीएफ के मीनिंग के लिए भी बेसिक प्लस डीए फॉर्मिंग पार्ट प्लस कमीशन बेस्ड ऑन टर्नओवर, वो ही रेलिवेंट है। तो इन दिस केस ऑल्सो मतलब जो आपके सबमिट 11% दिया है, आपको तो 12% तक अलाउड ही है, तो वैसे तो कुछ प्रॉब्लम ही नहीं लग रहा है मेरे को। एम्प्लॉयर्स कॉन्ट्रीब्यूशन को लेके तो मेरे को कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं लग रहा है, इट इज वेल विद इन लिमिट। ओके, एम्प्लॉइज कॉन्ट्रीब्यूशन भी इक्वली है और टोटल कॉन्ट्रीब्यूशन अकॉर्डिंगली डबल हो गया। अब आपने देखा कि इन्होंने ज्वाइन ही इसी साल किया है, मतलब पहले से तो कोई लॉक चल ही नहीं रहा है, जो है वो अभी है। एंड 31 मार्च 2024 को आपको अक्यूमुलेटेड इंटरेस्ट दिया है, मतलब वट एवर हैज हैपेंड इज द अक्यूमुलेशन ड्यूरिंग द ईयर, बिकॉज देयर वाज नथिंग, ही वाज नॉट इन द कंपनी बिफोर दिस। Okay, and we have no knowledge of anything coming from any other fund being transferred to this employer's fund. We have no knowledge of that, so we'll assume that this is his accumulated balance in the provident fund. Okay, तो इतना हो गया टोटल कंट्रीब्यूशन। अब समवेयर इट रिंग्स अ बेल, ये अमाउंट थोड़ा ज्यादा नहीं लग रहा है आपको? कोई एक लिमिट है जो आपको देखना चाहिए?
यस मैम।
एम्प्लॉइज कॉन्ट्रीब्यूशन पे कोई लिमिट है क्या?
2,50,000 की लिमिट है।
तो वैसे तो एम्प्लॉइज कॉन्ट्रीब्यूशन का कोई डिडक्शन,
प्रीमियम
जब
2,50,000
आपको 80C में ऑप्शनल रेजिम में 80C में भले ही मिल सकता है, सैलरी कैलकुलेशन में रेलेवेंट नहीं है। बट एक चीज है कि अगर 2.5 लाख के ऊपर एम्प्लॉय कॉन्ट्रीब्यूशन है तो उसके ऊपर जो इंटरेस्ट अक्रू हो रहा है वो भी एक टैक्सेबल रिक्विजिट है। ठीक है, तो 2.5 लाख के ऊपर कितना एम्प्लॉय कॉन्ट्रीब्यूशन है? Are we all on this same page that 304920 minus 2.5 lakh is the excess employees contribution? Are we all together on this?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes ma'am।
Yes.
Question tells you that the interest accrued in the RPF as on 31st March 2024 is 49325. Okay, And there is no opening balance as on 1st April because Mr. Saif had not even joined this company as on that date. That means इस साल में एवरेज आउटस्टैंडिंग बैलेंस के ऊपर इंटरेस्ट अक्रूड इतना था. अब इससे आपको कोई प्रोविजन याद आ रहा है 17(2) के अंडर कि आपको क्या करना है टैक्सेबल परक्विजिट में? किसी को कुछ याद आ रहा है? ये बहुत कम अप्लाई होता है, पर अगर आएगा ना तो क्वेश्चन सिर्फ आपके इसी नॉलेज को चेक करने के लिए आएगा. अब देखो इस सम में और कोई एडजस्टमेंट ही नहीं है. So, with effect from 1st April 2021, there has been a new provision that if there is employees contribution exceeding 2.5 lakhs, then the interest on excess employees contribution is taxable. In this case, excess employees contribution is 54,920. Total interest is 49,325. But this total interest is on the total accumulated balance in the RPF, which comprises of employers contribution and employees contribution. This being the first year, इसमें और कोई एलिमेंट नहीं है, यही उसका एनुअल बैलेंस है. तो आप इसको उससे डिवाइड करके एक्सेस एम्प्लॉइज कंट्रीब्यूशन से मल्टीप्लाई करेंगे. बेसिकली इंटरेस्ट अक्रूड इन द फंड ऑन द एंटायर बैलेंस ऑफ आरपीएफ को प्रोरेट करेंगे in the ratio of excess employees contribution only. That means how much of interest would have accrued on the excess employees contribution. If we do a simple unitary method, we get this kind of prorating, and the answer comes to this. 442 is the interest accrued on excess employees contribution. Are we all on this same page? ये कैलकुलेशन सबने किया 49325 डिवाइडेड बाय 609840 इंटू 454920.
मैम
यस
मैम जो एम्प्लॉयर का कंट्रीब्यूशन होगा उस पे इंटरेस्ट तो इनकम फ्रॉम अदर सोर्सेज में होना चाहिए ना.
तो अभी हम क्या निकाल रहे हैं? हम तो सैलरी इनकम निकाल रहे हैं.
बट मैम इस
और वैसे भी ये तो आरपीएफ है. हाँ वैसे भी तो ये आरपीएफ है.
मैम ये जो कंप्लीट इंटरेस्ट है 49325, इसमें तो एम्प्लॉयर का भी इंटरेस्ट इंक्लूडेड है ना.
हाँ इंक्लूडेड है.
सो मैम उसको अलग नहीं करेंगे यहाँ पे, मतलब सैलरी में सिर्फ एम्प्लॉय का जो इंटरेस्ट होगा वो यहाँ पे आना चाहिए ना.
तो पहली बात, आप जो बता रहे हैं आईएफओएस, आप शायद यूआरपीएफ से कंफ्यूज हो रहे हैं. अनरिकग्नाइज्ड फंड में हमने आपको बोला था कि आप एम्प्लॉई के कंट्रीब्यूशन के इंटरेस्ट को आईएफओएस में लेके जाएंगे. ठीक है, अदरवाइज हमको आईएफओएस में जाना नहीं है. आरपीएफ के केस में ये तो रिकग्नाइज्ड फंड है, इसमें हमको आईएफओएस में तो जाना ही नहीं है. दैट इज फर्स्ट. सेकंड, आप बोल रहे हो कि हमने तो एम्प्लॉयर का भी कंट्रीब्यूशन ले लिया. कैसे लिया? देखो हमने कैलकुलेशन में लिया, बट व्हाट वी आर ट्राइंग टू कैलकुलेट इज द इंटरेस्ट ऑन is the interest on excess employees contribution only. हमने डिनोमिनेटर में फंड का बैलेंस लिया है, उसमें एम्प्लॉयर कंट्रीब्यूशन भी घुसा है. अब क्या कर सकते हैं, अगर ये 2-3 साल के बाद होता तो इसमें 2-3 साल का एम्प्लॉयर और एम्प्लॉय कंट्रीब्यूशन और अक्यूमुलेटेड इंटरेस्ट सब घुसा होता. ओके, what we are trying to see, we are trying to calculate interest on excess employees contribution. But how will we calculate? Because the number we have is interest on total fund balance. So we need to calculate effective rate of interest first, कि एक्चुअली किस रेट से इंटरेस्ट अक्रू हो रहा है आरपीएफ पे. अगर 80 लाख के फंड कॉर्पस पे 80,000 का इंटरेस्ट अक्रू हो रहा है तो इफेक्टिव इंटरेस्ट रेट भी हम कैलकुलेट करना चाहते हैं. आर वी ऑल टुगेदर? हमने 49325 डिवाइडेड बाय 609840 किया टू डिटरमिन द इफेक्टिव रेट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट जो इस फंड चल रहा है. उसको हमने एक्सेस एम्प्लॉइज कंट्रीब्यूशन पे अप्लाई करके निकाला कि इस पे कितना इंटरेस्ट अक्रू हुआ था. ओके, आर वी ओके?
एक्सेस अमाउंट है वो टैक्सेबल नहीं होगी, जैसे कि 54,920.
54,920 एक्सेस ऑफ एम्प्लॉइज कंट्रीब्यूशन
यस मैम,
टैक्सेबल होती.
मतलब ये टैक्सेबल होता है. इसमें तो लिखा हुआ है कि क्या क्या टैक्सेबल होगा. तो उसमें लिखा हुआ है कंट्रीब्यूशन मेड बाय द पर्सन इन अकाउंट ड्यूरिंग द प्रीवियस ईयर 21-22 एंड सब्सिक्वेंट प्रीवियस ईयर व्हिच इज इन एक्सेस ऑफ ईयरली थ्रेशोल्ड लिमिट. एंड इंटरेस्ट अक्रूड देयर ऑन, ये दोनों लिखे हुए हैं, तो ये 54 वाला नहीं आएगा, 54,920 वाला?
54 तो मैम टैक्सेबल है ही ना, जो एक्सेस कंट्रीब्यूशन के वो तो टैक्सेबल है ही, 54,920।
नहीं, 54,920 एक्सेस एम्प्लॉइज कॉन्ट्रीब्यूशन तो कभी भी टैक्सेबल नहीं होता। मतलब वो तो डिडक्टेबल हो रहा है या नहीं आपको तो वो देखने का है। मतलब फंडामेंटली आई एम टॉकिंग अबाउट, आप लोग क्यों ऐसे कंफ्यूज हो रहे हैं? एम्प्लॉइज
मैम कोई
कॉन्ट्रीब्यूशन मतलब आपका
7,50,000
पैसा कट के
का
आ
भी
रहा है।
लिमिट है क्या?
हाँ सॉरी,
7,50,000 का भी कोई लिमिट है क्या?
7,50,000 है लिमिट, पर वो एक अलग लिमिट है। सेवन लाख
उसमें
फिफ्टी
टैक्सेबल होता
थाउजेंड की
है?
आप जो बात कर रहे हैं एम्प्लॉयर कॉन्ट्रीब्यूशन के ऊपर है। इन केस ऑफ आरपीएफ एंड अप्रूव्ड ऐसे है सुपर एनुएशन फंड।
यस मैम, समझ गई। ये जो 54 वाला है वो तो ऑलरेडी होगा, क्योंकि वो एम्प्लॉय का हिस्सा है, और एम्प्लॉय का हिस्सा तो ऑलरेडी पहले से ही टैक्सेबल होता है, मतलब
हाँ वही
बेसिकली।
मैं बोल रही हूँ, आप लोग फंडामेंटली एक बात क्लियर रखें। एम्प्लॉय का कंट्रीब्यूशन मतलब आपका खुद का पैसा जो कट के आपको मिल रहा है, ठीक है वो, और उसका डिडक्शन भी आपको नहीं मिल रहा है इनकम फ्रॉम सैलरीज में, तो वो तो ऑलरेडी घुसा हुआ है, उसका तो आपने कभी कोई क्लेम ही नहीं किया। वो एक्सेस हो अनएक्सेस हो कहीं से भी हो, इट इज ऑलरेडी देयर, व्हाई विल यू टैक्स इट अगेन?
यस मैम।
हाँ, मतलब you don't need to do any treatment to employees contribution, you only need to find out interest on excess employees contribution. Okay,
यस
ओके मैम, गॉट इट।
got it. और इंटरेस्ट ऑन एम्प्लॉइज कॉन्ट्रीब्यूशन का ना दो लिमिट्स होता है। एक तो यू हैव टू चेक इफ इट इज इन एक्सेस ऑफ 9.5% पर एनम, यहाँ पे तो आप देखोगे कि इफेक्टिव इंटरेस्ट रेट, और या फिर यू नीड टू चेक अगर एम्प्लॉइज कॉन्ट्रीब्यूशन एक्सीड्स 2.5 lakhs, तो यहाँ पे मॉनेटरी टर्म्स में फिजिकल टर्म्स में द वैल्यू एक्सीड्स 2.5 lakhs, तो हमने उसी तरह से इसको प्रोरेट करके इफेक्टिव रेट इंटरेस्ट निकाल के ये ऐसे कर दिया। ठीक है, क्योंकि अगर आप इफेक्टिव इंटरेस्ट रेट देखेंगे वो पर से 9.5% से ज्यादा नहीं है, तो आपको फिर 2.5 lakhs का पैरामीटर लेना पड़ेगा। ये देखो ये 8% ही है ना। अगर ये इफेक्टिव इंटरेस्ट रेट भी 9.5 से ऊपर होता तो वो भी एक पैरामीटर हो जाता, दैट वुड हैव बीन एन एग्जाम, दैट वुड आल्सो हैव बीन अ रेलेवेंट परक्विजिट। बट चार्जेबिलिटी सेक्शंस मतलब इनके अलग अलग है। ये जो 9.5% का लिमिट है वो सेक्शन 17(1) में आता है, और ये जो एक्सेस ऑफ इंटरेस्ट ऑन एक्सेस ऑफ एम्प्लॉइज कॉन्ट्रीब्यूशन, ये दूसरे 17(2) के एक सब क्लॉज में आता है। ठीक है, बट दैट इज ओके, डजंट मैटर। ठीक है, तो मतलब व्हाट आई एम ट्राइंग टू से इज कि आपको रिलेटिव टर्म्स में तो वो 12% एंड 9.5% को ध्यान रखना है, एब्सोल्यूट टर्म्स में भी ये 7.5 lakhs और 2.5 lakhs के अमाउंट्स को भी ध्यान रखना है। दिस इज व्हाट दिस सम इज ट्राइंग टू रिंग अ बेल इन योर ईयर्स। ओके, अच्छा, स्टैंडर्ड डिडक्शन आपने देना है, देयर इज नो डाउट, एंड यू गेट द टैक्सेबल सैलरी अंडर ओल्ड रेजिम। आर वी ऑल ऑन दिस? इज द कैलकुलेशन ओके विथ यू?
यस मैम,
ओके,
करेक्ट।
ठीक है, अब हम करेंगे करीना। करीना, Mrs. Karina, General Manager of Malabar Limited, was paid a salary 4.5 lakh per month. Above salary includes non-monetary perquisite. Wow. इस sum का जो की है, जो जेम है of this sum is the non-monetary perquisite के ऊपर का टैक्स on non-monetary perquisite which is borne by the employer. इसका ट्रीटमेंट किसको पता है? मतलब अगर ऊपर वाले सम का जेम था इंटरेस्ट ऑन एक्सेस एम्प्लॉइज कॉन्ट्रीब्यूशन, तो नीचे वाले सम का जेम है टैक्स ऑन नॉन मॉनेटरी परक्विजिट बोर्न बाय एम्प्लॉयर। हु नोज द ट्रीटमेंट ऑफ टैक्स ऑन नॉन मॉनेटरी परक्विजिट बोर्न बाय एम्प्लॉयर? इसका क्या मतलब होता है मैं बताती हूँ। इसका मतलब होता है कि आपके सैलरी स्ट्रक्चर में आपको कैश में तो ये 4.5 लाख मिल ही रहा है, और आपको कुछ नॉन मॉनेटरी बेनिफिट भी मिल रहा है 50,000 पर मंथ का। इस 50,000 पर मंथ के ऊपर में जो टीडीएस होना चाहिए वो कंपनी आपका काट नहीं रही है, वो खुद से जमा कर रही है अपने पॉकेट से। मतलब आपको ना ही 50 से ना सिर्फ 50,000 पर मंथ का बेनिफिट हुआ है, आपको उस टैक्स का भी बेनिफिट हुआ है जो आपसे नहीं कटा, कंपनी ने खुद ही दे दिया। करेक्ट? सो टैक्स ऑन नॉन मॉनेटरी perquisite पेड बाय एम्प्लॉयर इज ऑल्सो अ बेनिफिट दैट द कंपनी हैज गिवन टू यू। What is the treatment of this perquisite is what I want to know. चलो ask answer very quickly बच्चा लोग, we need to leave also now, we are already overshot shooting by 20 minutes. Okay, no problem. I have not explained this to you in the last class, so I don't have a problem if you don't already know it. Okay, चलो देखो क्या करते हैं. टैक्स ऑन नॉन मॉनेटरी परक्विजिट बोन्ड बाय एम्प्लॉयर एग्जेम्प्ट होता है अंडर सेक्शन 1010C. ओके, ये आपको याद रखना है. इसमें कुछ समझने की बात नहीं. ये एक प्रोविजन है, आपको याद रखना है कि ऐसा एक एग्जेम्पशन है. मतलब नॉन मॉनेटरी परक्विजिट तो टैक्सेबल है, उसको तो आप ऊपर ले लेंगे, पर उसके ऊपर का टैक्स अगर एम्प्लॉयर ने अपने पॉकेट से दे दिया तो कोई बात नहीं, वो हम फिर से अपने हाथ में टैक्स नहीं, टैक्सेबल परक्विजिट नहीं मानेंगे. लेकिन एक टैक्स है जो एम्प्लॉयर ने दे दिया हमारे बिहाफ में, तो नीचे जो टीडीएस का कैलकुलेशन होता है या टैक्स लायबिलिटी का कैलकुलेशन होता है, उसके लिए ये चीज रेलेवेंट है. क्योंकि इट इज योर टैक्स लायबिलिटी पार्टली डिस्चार्ज बाय योर एम्प्लॉयर, यू शुड एटलीस्ट क्लेम क्रेडिट ऑफ दैट, यू आर एलिजिबल टू क्लेम क्रेडिट ऑफ दैट. तो आप जब टोटल टैक्स लायबिलिटी डिटर्मिन करेंगे उसमें से इसको यूज कर लेंगे, बैलेंस आप अपने पॉकेट से देंगे या बैलेंस टीडीएस आपका एम्प्लॉयर काटेगा. ठीक है, डिड वी गेट इट? दैट जब भी आपको टैक्स ऑन नॉन मॉनेटरी परक्विजिट आए तो आपको उसको दो जगह रेलेवेंट रखना है. एक तो ऊपर में वो एग्जेम्प्ट है, वो आपको बोल के एग्जेम्प्ट कर देना है, और एक नीचे टोटल टैक्स लायबिलिटी से उसको यूज भी कर लेना है, क्योंकि इट इज योर टैक्सेस ओनली विच कंपनी हैज पेड ऑन योर बिहाफ. ओके, ठीक है. अगर आपने इतना समझ लिया तो इस सब में और कोई खास ट्रीटमेंट नहीं है. उसके अलावा आपको ग्रॉस सैलरी निकालना है, डिडक्शंस देने हैं. ये डिफॉल्ट रजीम है, तो इधर भी आपको डिडक्शन तो सब देना ही है, कोई दिक्कत नहीं है. जीटीआई आएगा आपके पास, डिफॉल्ट रजीम है, मतलब आपको एटीसी मिलेगा क्या? मिलेगा क्या एटीसी डिफॉल्ट रजीम में?
नो मैम.
So then again, you get total income, you calculate tax on total income. Slabs are as usual. I hope you are okay with the slabs. Since she is way above 50 lakhs of income, so what I've done is 1,50,000 plus anything in excess of 15 lakhs subject to 30%. This is the basic tax. Please, another thing to remember over here, कि her taxable income has crossed 50 lakhs. So this person is liable to surcharge of 10% also. 50 से 1 करोड़ के बीच में इनका इनकम है, इनके ऊपर सरचार्ज भी लगेगा 10%. वो आप प्लीज याद रखना. सेस बेसिक टैक्स और सरचार्ज के ऊपर सेस लगता है. सो आप बेसिक टैक्स निकालेंगे, सरचार्ज उसके ऊपर निकालेंगे, फिर एक सब टोटल बनाएंगे, उसके ऊपर सेस निकालेंगे. सेस इज ऑन बेसिक टैक्स प्लस सरचार्ज. ओके, उसके बाद आपको टोटल टैक्स लायबिलिटी आएगा. आप इसका एक इफेक्टिव परसेंटेज निकालेंगे. व्हाट इज द इफेक्टिव परसेंटेज ऑफ टोटल टैक्स लायबिलिटी ऑन योर टोटल इनकम? ओके, सो ये आ गया आपका टोटल टैक्स लायबिलिटी. और क्योंकि आपका टीडीएस प्रोविजन ऐसा बोलता है सैलरी में कि आपको इफेक्टिव रेट ऑफ टैक्स पे टीडीएस करना चाहिए. और फिर आप देखेंगे कि इतना तो एम्प्लॉयर ने ऑलरेडी पे कर दिया है, तो बैलेंस आप एम्प्लॉय से काटेंगे. दिस विल हेल्प यू आंसर द डिफरेंट लिम्स ऑफ दिस क्वेश्चन. आर वी ऑल ओके? जो चीजें मैंने हाईलाइट की है परहैप्स आपने उधर ही कहीं गड़बड़ किया होगा, इसलिए आपके आंसर्स मैच नहीं हुए. बट नाउ आर वी ओके विथ इट?
यस मैम.
Okay, chalo, thank you. So all the solutions will be uploaded on the website with the updated deck. It has acronyms at different places for you to quickly remember the concepts. Okay. I hope you liked the class. I hope it made sense to you. Income from salaries, income from house property, both of them. Right? आपको कुछ और बोलना है, कुछ पूछना है?
मैम सितंबर 24 के सॉल्यूशन, अच्छा ठीक, कब तक आएंगे?
आप ये क्वेरी, पब्लिकेशन रिलेटेड क्वेरी, वो मेरे दिए हुए ईमेल आईडी पे आप क्वेरी करें. ठीक है,
ओके ओके मैम.
क्योंकि वो बोर्ड ऑफ स्टडीज डायरेक्टली आपको पब्लिकेशन रिलेटेड कोई भी बात हो तो वो ही आपको बताएंगे. राइट? अच्छा, क्या कैन आई मेक अ वेरी स्मॉल रिक्वेस्ट कि प्लीज आप अपने कैमरास को एक बार स्विच ऑन करिए. लेट अस टेक अ ग्रुप सेल्फी. इट इज अ वेरी फेस्टिव मूड, एटलीस्ट इन द ईस्ट पार्ट ऑफ इंडिया. सो लेट अस प्लीज टेक सेल्फीज टू रिमेम्बर दिस क्लास. एक ग्रुप स्क्रीनशॉट ले लेंगे प्लीज, इफ इट इज पॉसिबल फॉर यू. प्लीज स्विच ऑन योर कैमरास. Maybe the recording can be paused.
Ma'am, the host has not stopped the video.
Okay, ठीक है. Okay, no problems. No problems.
मैम आपकी नेक्स्ट क्लास है
Sorry.
हाँ मतलब पीजीबीपी क्लास आप लोगे
नहीं, अभी मुझे इस टर्म के लिए Jan 25 के लिए 2 ही क्लासेस अलॉट हुए हैं. सो प्लीज आई रिक्वेस्ट यू, आपको अगर क्लासेस अच्छे लग रहे हैं, इट मेक्स सेंस टू यू, प्लीज गिव गुड फीडबैक so that we can be in continuous support. But for the time being, I am here with you only for these 2 classes. I wish all the best to you. I wish आप बहुत अच्छा एग्जाम्स में अपियर करें, अच्छे से प्रिपेयर हो. Already I am very confident about your preparation. You just need a little bit of brushing up, a little bit of more application of mind in the exams. Sleep well, practice by hand. These are some tips I will give you based on my own experience. Okay. And I wish you all the best for all your chapters, for all your subjects, for the coming exams. I hope you emerge with flying colors. Have a very good, upcoming festival season. Okay. Stay well, stay happy. Often students come under a lot of stress and pressure because of exams, etc. Which is genuine. I can't say please don't take stress. वो हो ही जाता है. But try to, keep yourself lively through things you enjoy. And that will help you overcome this part. Always think that this will pass, and there'll be a better phase when you will already become a chartered accountant, and that will keep you going. Okay.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
ओके मैम
Thank you. All the best. Thank you.